Okay, it's just about 4 o'clock. Just to let you know before we get started, we'll just a few more minutes in case any community members come, but I want you to know who's sitting around the table, okay?
Okay.
Okay, I'm just gonna have everybody introduce themselves. We'll start with radio voice.
Kathy, I'm Mel Campbell.
Yeah.
Hi,
Nice to
Kathy.
meet you.
It's Tina.
Colonel Campbell.
Tina.
Yep.
And then Earl said hello.
Hey, Earl.
Hey, Kiki Swinton, Director of Student Services.
Yeah.
Nakia Campbell, Instructional Services. And
Hello.
Christine Robinson, Director of Instructional Technology.
Hey. Great.
And of course, our Robin.
Hey, Robin.
Mr. Bennett, you're welcome to join us.
Thank you, I'm Missouri.
Okay. And Mr. Terry Bennett is here. Hey, but even in observing doesn't mean that questions can't be thrown that way, right?
I'll answer anything.
Okay. Hi. How are you? Good. How about you? Good. And Rachel is here. From
Okay,
Buford
great.
Buford Gazette. It's Adams, right, Rachel? Rachel Adams?
No, Jones.
Jones, I'm so sorry.
Also,
Rachel Jones, my apologies.
Hey, Ron.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to call this meeting to order, and if everyone would just stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You're awesome. Are you really standing? Okay, we're going to start out with the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion for approval?
Second.
Awesome, great. And public comments? Oh, sorry. I always forget to do that. Thank you, Mel. Okay, all in favor of approval of the agenda? Aye. Thank you. We don't have any community members here today. So we're going to go right and to jump to approval of the May 15th meeting minutes. Can I have a motion?
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, I move we approve minutes.
Okay, I second. I do have a question though.
Okay. Discussion?
You know what, and I don't have my folder with me from the last meeting, so maybe this is why I'm blanking on this. But, it says at the last page that, Bonnie Allman and Karen Gilbert presented information that showed how each student's progress is measured effectively toward achieving and or exceeding performance standards. Was this on the PE that we were talking about?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
I can change it and make it, I can include the PE to,
Yeah, because remember we were talking about the assessments and it was just that broad range of topics for that PE. I think it was 1.3. Is that right?
Right, yeah.
I can include that on there to make it more clear if you want, because that should have been further up.
Yeah, that's okay. I just,
It's in the wrong area, because this is where it's talking about the K through 8, and this was with the discussion, so it needs to be moved.
okay, that's what was confusing to me.
Yes,
Okay.
because we're talking about the K through 8, and it needs to be moved up under the comprehensive plan. I need to move it up, back up there.
Okay,
Yeah.
So I'll make that correction.
Okay.
okay, thank you.
Thanks for catching that, Kathy.
Okay.
Okay, so so then all in favor of approving the minutes with that one amendment?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We're going to start out with the instructional software audit proposal, You know, Tanya's not here right now. She had a family commitment that she had to take care of. So Chrissy Robinson is going to present this for us.
So I know you guys received the initial scope of work that McCrell did. We reviewed it at the April 23rd meeting. You guys gave us some feedback on wanting it to be, I think, less of a focus on the manuals, all of the documentation and procedures, and more on the actual impact that the technology is having on instruction in the classroom. So we went to McCrell. We had a long conversation with them about kind of what we were looking for, what you guys were looking for. And although I think that a lot of what they were going to do was in the really long scope of work, their, you know, 2-pager that they kind of presented to us didn't explain all of that. So they went back through. You've gotten a copy of kind of how that is going to change. Do you want me to kind of give an overall, or have you had a chance to look through it and you're ready for questions? Or
I have looked through it, and you know, why don't we start with the general question: is what are you hoping as a technology director? What are you hoping to get out of this audit?
Well, I think that ultimately this kind of paints a picture of what I'd like to get, because they're going to go into schools, and we've done this ourselves, you know, but we also have a little bit of a biased view of what's going on. But we want them to see what's going on in the classrooms, to review our initiatives, our goals, the training that we've done, the pieces that we've put in place for how the technology will impact achievement, and help us to see better what the schools are actually doing. So they're going to meet with school leadership, they're going to do classroom observations, they're going to talk to teachers, because some schools are integrating really well. And at some of those schools where they are using the software that we put in place, we are seeing higher achievement on POC scores and on test scores, but it's not being duplicated everywhere. And so we're hoping that they will be able to make recommendations that we can maybe mandate even to the principals, as far as you need to do professional development so your teachers can use this product. We're seeing it work in other schools, and we need to do that, but we need a little bit. I think we need them to reiterate what we are seeing, or maybe tell us things we're not seeing. There might be things that we need to do from a district leadership to lead better, maybe evaluate software in a different way. How are we purchasing this? How are we doing the training, so they can tell us how we can better serve the students. So I know one of the ways that kind of my kind of final summary in reading this is, you know, the final report will include, you know, the district's intention in regards to technology integration, the extent to which the schools are actually implementing, and where the gaps are, and making recommendations to help fill those gaps using the technology.
And did you have, you did mention this, I'm not aware of this, I haven't seen this, but a plan that was, you know, what were the objectives of the technology that's being used in the schools? I mean, when you talk about your training and that type of thing, what was the district hoping to accomplish through the technology? Were there specific objectives that you were working toward?
There are, and I was telling, actually, Ms. Fidrich and I had a chance to talk before the meeting, and I'll kind of share with you guys. The state gives us a template that is very, maybe strict's not the word, but it is limited in what we can fill out ourselves. You know, we can choose kind of which software and which devices, but they, you know, under the technology dimensions and goals, we have to, under learners in their environment, you know, the goal is, you know, facilitating high achievement by providing optimal resources for students, providing curriculum and professional development. So they kind of give us our goals, and then how we use those is up to us. They give us an outline. So it is kind of limited. They are thankfully changing that process, or the plan. It was initially due June 30th of this year. It is a 3-year plan, but they are going to give us, I think, a little more flexibility in creating a lot of our own goals. And so they've pushed that back to February, and are going to send us the new template and outline. They said by the end of the summer, so we can start working on that. think Terry, you sent
Okay.
that email to us
So
about how they're
I'm
changing the
looking
tech plan.
in the McCrell report, table 2, example rating table for objectives, and there were objectives 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. Are those the state objectives that you were given?
They gave us a guide and we kind of reworded those, so those are part of them.
Okay.
So under that dimension, under learners and their environment.
Right.
Yeah, so those are the goals that we created based on their recommendations. So we kind of were able to word it, but we had to talk about, the 21st century skills. They kind of gave us the outline that we had to use, if that makes sense.
Okay. Another question. When we're talking about technology usage, are we, in addition to software, are we talking about the use of the whiteboards, the Prometheum? I don't know what they're called these days. The smart boards.
Right now we have 3 different versions because we're in the process of upgrading. The newest schools have the Epson projector, the older schools have the Promethean. We've refreshed about half of them with the new box light panels. So it doesn't specifically address that. I think that that is something we can add, but most of them are using that as projection. You're going to see a lot more of the touch screen and interactivity with having kids come to the board in the lower grades, just because it is so important for them to use their hands and manipulate objects. And so you will see a lot more interactivity with the students using the panels in the lower grades. In the upper grades, they're going to be using it, to project whatever is on their screen, whatever's on the teacher's laptop.
Right. Okay. So
Kathy?
the training that the primary teachers would have had, the elementary teachers would have, may have to be new when we change out the boards, so
Right.
that they can make best use of those boards. I know how important those boards are in an
Right.
elementary classroom.
So I know with the schools that have already been refreshed to the new box light panels, we do have like a mandatory 1-hour training. We either do it during planning periods or after school, so they can at least familiarize themselves with the boards, and then the technology coaches will go in kind of one-on-one or during planning periods later, and now let me show you how to use all the software, and here's how you can create the shapes, here's how you can create them so the students can manipulate them and move them around and count and drag the money and all that kind of stuff. So that part of the training comes after that initial training, and it's usually one-on-one or in a small group setting during planning periods. But that is something that we do. We require all the teachers getting those panels to have, so they will use them the way that they're intended, and not just as especially in the lower grades, just as a screen, but to be interactive.
Yeah.
Okay. Kathy, Mel has, go ahead, Mel.
Thank you, Kathy. Because you asked all the questions I had in mind. Yes, you did. One of them is, you said you have objectives, but and I see the measuring rubric there. But are there particulars in terms of what you look for when you're evaluating the progress? For example, I have experience with those smart boards, Promethean boards, what we had. I'd say initially I just used it as an updated blackboard.
Right.
And there are so many other uses for it. And I'm talking 12, 13 years ago.
We still have a few of those.
Yeah, and how are you assuring that these teachers are using it at the optimum level?
Right. Well, that is one thing we are hoping McCrell will be able to help us do, because ultimately are the principals, when they're doing classroom observations, are they seeing them using them? Are they requiring that the teachers come to professional development? Because unfortunately, that's not always the case. Some schools, the principal's like, we're doing training every other week. We're doing 30-minute training on technology, and you're going to come, you're going to learn how to use it, you're going to learn how to use it within your instruction to make it more engaging.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to add, sorry.
Who monitors that principal? You said some principal. In terms of technology and the money being spent across the board in technology, who's managing to make sure all principals are doing this? Or at least all principals are doing what you want as a minimum.
So I feel like if that is the expectation, that should be a part of their dashboard, their evaluation. So
principals, just being a former principal, it's an expectation that you're in a classroom and you're observing, but that should be a part of the observation tool that principals use when they go in. But what I think, this is just me having this conversation, I think we need to train our principals on what the look-fors are with technology when they go in the classroom. Because it's exactly what you're saying. You know, I see them using the device, but, you know, how does that really impact the achievement that we want in the classroom?
Well, and we might need to make some decisions on who is going to make sure the principals are following that and then make sure the principals are doing that. Because that's kind of, I think, one of the things that we need to have in place is we can offer the training all day long, but
It's just holding them accountable.
right, and hopefully the audit will help us when they make those recommendations that, okay, only 20 of our 32 schools are enforcing this technology training, that we can make that recommendation to the superintendent.
Yeah, I see that being a difficult direction in terms of how you're gonna get that done. I'm thinking that you have to have a technology person from the district go in and observe and give the principal a report,
Like an academic.
just like McGrail is doing.
Right,
But you got that going on
right,
consistently because that person knows
right,
Right.
more about the technology.
right.
You have to train every principal.
And there,
Yeah,
there are some principals that are.
Yeah, there's some who know,
Yeah.
but that's good, but I'm saying.
And we do have some
Instead of
technology,
training more,
yeah. And we have
you got
technology
training.
coaches that
Yes.
do the training, that do help go in, and after the training, they will follow up with the teacher, they will do observations, give feedback. But again, having that leadership even above them to make it
Yeah,
mandated
yeah,
is where we're hoping this audit will help us to put those
Yes,
things in
I'm not
place.
buying into those, you know, you get attached to people. Oh, you did a wonderful job, you know, and because I trained you, of course.
And we are a little
That's what I'm saying, so,
Well, and as-
why
and as
somebody
a
else
leader-
needs to come in.
Yeah, well, as a leader,
Right.
I want feedback on how I'm doing as a technology leader too. So what gaps is there that I can fill? Is it that we need more training? Is it we need training in different ways or a different type of training? So that, I think it will be good for me, you know, professionally to be able to learn what I can do better as a leader also.
Getting back to the actual revised scope of the work, you know, this recent document that audit itself, you know, I just have some real concerns because a lot of what you're just saying now is stuff that I don't see that this audit is going to cover. A lot of the concerns that the board, Mr. Campbell and Dr. Bodge, you might be able to, you know, chime in on this, but a lot of our concerns are our software. Is our software really giving us, you know, what is it, $130,000 for Naviance, $200,000 for Rosetta Stone. But when you read what this scope is, first of all, it says that the second report will include a set of school profiles that provide a summary of student achievement. Well, we can get that.
Right.
We know what our student achievement is, so that's something that we can get. We have a fabulous data, group. And then it says, of the schools in the study,
Right.
there are only 4 to 8 schools in the whole study. They're not, you know, we've got 32 schools. The other part of the profile will summarize how technology was implemented at that school.
Right.
Not, I mean, it's just talking 4 to 8 schools. This evaluation will not be able to demonstrate a causal link. No causal link for this $55,000 audit.
Well, I think part of that is at the schools, I'm going to use Will Branch Early College as an example. Miss Dixon has done a really great job of requiring her teachers to do technology training. They do it every other week during their planning period. And they have targeted for specific things. EOC courses, we're going to use USA Test Prep as one of our main resources we're going to study, and their EOC scores have increased a lot since Mona's been there. However, she's also done a lot of other things at the school to help increase achievement. So I think that sometimes it's really, a lot of these companies that I've noticed, and they all kind of put those disclaimers in those RFPs are, we can't say it's just because of the technology that this has increased, because a lot of schools do other things. So that's my guess as to why they're putting that in. I think that
I would have to take a chance,
Yeah.
you know, when we're spending $55,000. It says, because the evaluation will focus on implementation level data, the summary reports will demonstrate what the district had intended to implement, to what extent it's implemented, and recommend the gaps. I think you've already identified so many gaps.
We have.
And I'm also very concerned that, like, there's been no self-evaluation of the plan in 3 years.
Right.
Ever since the introduction of the plan, 2016, 2019, and it's on the website, the plan, which really, this is part of it.
Right.
So it's almost like, if you haven't done a self-evaluation, where's your own baseline? Where's your do you see what I'm saying?
I do, and we have done a lot of evaluation on the software usage itself, and there are several big programs that we have realized over the last couple of years are not giving us the best bang for our buck. You mentioned several of them, Naviance, Rosetta Stone. We have 1 year of a contract left on those, or those would have been, taken
What
off
does
this
it
year.
cost to break a contract?
There is, from what Terry, you might be able to, we went to Reggie Murphy to ask him, is there any, Jerry Henderson and I, is there any fine print that if we're not happy with this, if we're not
Right.
getting the results we
Right.
need, we can get out of it? And he said, no, I don't know that there is. You might be able to answer, is there a fine for breaking their contract, or is there,
Well, no, you just, if they, no, not necessarily.
I mean, if it's a contract, it's,
And then you break it. It has to be broken.
what repercussions are there for
Breaking the
breaking a
contract.
contract?
Well, they're gonna let their money no matter what.
And so I get, it's the timing of this audit that concerns
Right.
me too, because first of all, we're going to have a new chief instructional services officer. And whomever that turns out to be is either going to have some real strong thoughts, I imagine, on how technology supports student achievement and instruction.
Yep.
And so it says right in here that they are going to meet with the leadership. Well, that would be you
Right.
without a doubt, but it would also be our chief instructional services officer
Right.
as well as other
Right.
people. I'm just concerned about the cost, which $55,000, I did a little math, you figure a third-year teacher is probably $40,000 with a 40% load, that's $16,000, that's $56,000 for
A
you know what I
person.
mean, for a person.
Especially when we're talking about cutting people.
Right.
No, I understand.
Plus, on the budget, 2 tech coaches are considered to be cut, so there's already been some
Right.
discussion about the need to, not, you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Well, and I can say that we have done the document review, that part of what they were gonna do is review all of the software, data evaluations that we've already done. So we've already done a lot of that. I think that, the focus on achievement, because it is so hard when, we were asked to present to the board on, where we are on the plan and the evaluation, it's really hard to show, did the achievement increase or decrease, and is it because of the technology? And I think that's why Tanya said, well, why don't we do an audit to see if somebody else can help us find that causal
Yeah.
link.
And it says right here.
Right.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Can I ask
Yes.
something? So this is my question. We have usage data for all of these.
Yes.
These things. So my rudimentary study that I would do is I would take the usage data and I'd isolate students that used it so many times and look at their test scores. I take 3 layers of students. Kids that never used it and what happened to their test scores. Kids that used it very, infrequently, and what happened to their test scores, and kids that used it often and didn't have any impact on their test scores. I would think that would be something that each principal could actually do on
Right,
their own.
and we have all those reports and can get them easily. So I do think it's just a matter of having the manpower, have the principals go in and look, and then us looking from a district, which schools really used it well. And we have done that. I think it's just, I think maybe it's a small part of the technology plan, because it also includes all the devices, all the infrastructure, all the bandwidth and the network and everything else. So I think that
There very well might be an audit out there that might answer more of what we're looking for, but I'm not sure this is the one. Because there was another comment, or another sentence in here that says, we'll summarize how technology was implemented at that school. So remember, only 4 to 8 schools, so that Beaufort County School District can look for the patterns.
Right. Well, we
I
already
mean-
do have a lot of all those. We
So-
do have a lot of that already, and I don't know. I know it was Tanya that initially kind of initiated this, and I think it was because of the board presentation when we started looking over, you know, the plan and the fact that it had not. A lot of the evaluation had been done, but it was not done in a big formal, you know, report. I think that's where she thought, well, maybe we do need to bring this in. But I mean, we can definitely do a report on without this, and then maybe see if we need to look further.
Maybe I just have such great faith. I mean, I know your work. I know so many of your tech coaches' work. I know that you guys. I'm not really sure that this is. They're going to take all your work, and they're not even going to provide us with a causal link or something that, you know, they're going to give suggestions and so on. You said the plan is going to change. I mean, as far as the template for February, you don't even know exactly what data you're going to need for it. So, I mean, just given all this, and the timing, $55,000 is a teacher, a third-year teacher, teachers that you want to grasp and hang on to, and because it's all coming out of the same operating budget. It's not even a, you know.
Right.
So I don't know, Mel and Kathy, I'm inclined to not recommend this audit at this time.
You know what, I think based on, well, after reading it more carefully and just in this conversation here, I don't know that this audit is going to get us any more detailed information than we can get ourselves. What I would like to say is if we don't go forward with this audit, that it sounds like we're going to be writing a new technology plan, and that plan has got to be written with measurable annual goals that will actually be measured.
Hey, Kathy, did you say measurable? No, you're right.
And I do think, just to piggyback on that, I think the State Department got a lot of feedback about the way the plan was laid out before, and I think that is why they are completely restructuring it. So hopefully we'll do that, and we could do a better job of writing. Now that, you know, I've, especially looking through this audit, I'm like, oh, the way these were written, we could easily do this ourselves, you know. So
I really believe you can.
Yeah, I wouldn't, I mean, the state, from what I saw, I mean, just a glimpse, it's very open and general, and it encompasses all of the state in terms of what the intentions are with technology. But I think as a district, we need to be a whole lot finer, because dollar for dollar, we're probably spending as much money as anybody in the state in technology. Whereas, you know, and I think we have to justify that as a district. Just within our own house, we have to show why these dollars are being spent and whether or not it's effective or not. And you got to do that inside.
Yeah. I think we have the data to do that. You know, just that experiment that Kathy just mentioned about taking the 3 groups and you have your sample sizes and extrapolate out what it is, and you know, your control group, and then your, you know what I'm talking about. So I think that we have here enough data to be able to make some decisions, and you've already made decisions. Just look what you said about Naviance. I mean, oh my gosh.
yeah. And I don't know if you were still using like. I agree.
You didn't see Chrissy's face. She agreed with you.
Yeah.
There's and that's, I mean, right there, that's $350,000.
The two.
Say that again. I'm sorry, Kathy.
I just said that one was a red flag for me the minute I saw it, because of my personal experiences with it.
Yeah. So,
So what? The bottom line, I don't feel that that we should recommend this to the board, because I don't think it's going to give us $55,000 worth of answers.
okay.
That's my opinion.
So,
Dr. Watt is going to mention something.
yeah, I would agree with the 3 of you. I wouldn't support this either. And I think Kathy's idea is very good of, seeing, we can get the usage data for these different programs, yeah. But you have to, at the same time too, you can't I know Bill's gonna agree with me since I was a math major in college
You
and
were?
taught math, yeah.
Okay.
That you can't, it's not necessarily the usage that's going to, you can't necessarily say that that is related to the outcomes. It may be the ones that are using it all the time are the students that go home and study every night, or, you know, there may be other factors there. But I do think it's a good idea to see, just is there a general trend here,
Absolutely.
or whatever, but we can't just say that that's, the
Right.
two
No,
are
but-
causative.
Right, but that information in concert
Right.
with the instructional services department that talks about, you know, increasing student achievement, the two together come to an educated decision.
Yeah.
You know, you can't do this in isolation. You have got to do this with our instructional services department. I mean, how can you make a decision or say we can't have naughtiness or guidance, but you know what I'm saying, you know, or Rosetta Stone, you need to do it in concert, and so that it's a unified, holistic kind of plan and assessment.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how
I know, I agree.
If I'm an instructional service officer, I'm gonna look to you for the data of usage, and then I'll cross-reference it myself in terms of what these schools are doing,
Right.
according to what your facts are and how many times they use each particular, you know, and then that way, and the cost. You know, if it costs $200,000 for Rosetta Stone, and they're not using it, then that's the first strike against it. I don't, you know, if they're not using it, and then if they are using it, how is the language improving? So those are the things that you can present, how often they're using it, and we can look at the numbers.
At their test scores and.
Yeah.
And some of the, some of the programs, I would guess, are used more frequently by drug users. There should be some of them that are designed to be remedial. So you look for growth. Since they started using these programs, have they shown growth?
I think in pockets we have seen they have, and in pockets we have seen where they haven't, and some of it is the expectation of usage at the school, and some of it is the leadership expectations and how it is done. Some teachers, will have it done in center rotations. I think it just depends on the expectation
Mathematics.
at the school. So I think it will help if we, especially, getting a new person will be the ideal time to say, the places we have seen it used appropriately, and with good usage, not too much either, because we don't want them on a tablet all day. We don't want who have used it in the intended way, and we've seen growth use them kind of as models.
Yeah. And you do the opposite too. Look at the numbers that are moving the most, the successful teachers, from special ed, and other pockets, and see how many times they're using the technology. Are you successful because you're using the technology? Are you successful because you're just good? And they'll relate. They relate that to you because, we don't say, yeah, they got a bunch of stuff in their cabinet, but it's never pulled out.
Yeah. So what would you recommend for when we, I guess, when and what, as far as the presentation to the board about the technology and how we're using it? What do you recommend? What do you think that the board is going to be looking for when we do that presentation, or do you think we just wait until we've kind of put some other things in place with the new plan? Because I know Ms. Orshak had that was her request that she wanted an update on the evaluation of the current plan. So I know we can provide a lot of that with the usage data and the comparisons, and some teacher surveys and the student surveys we've done.
Well, I would recommend that you actually do your own self-evaluation. It's the end of the 3-year plan. I don't anticipate you can go back and do anything on the past 2 years unless you have end of school year, data. But this was your plan.
Right.
This was your evaluation tool. I would fill that out,
Okay.
and then absolutely.
Present what's okay, perfect.
And then I think once we have a new chief instructional services officer that's identified with, whoever it turns out to be, again, your plan is going to be due in February, right? There are a lot of questions about the software, the cost of these software products. So, that would be my suggestion is you have a tool, you should evaluate yourselves, and that would be your first presentation, and then knowing that you will continue to go on in concert with instructional services, it will unfold. What are you, any
I
thoughts?
think that's perfect.
Yeah, I would think that's all they can do right now.
I agree.
in terms of,
I agree.
you know,
Yeah, and I would-
especially with the change of guard, you want to, you want to not try to impact it without any real basics, and no baselines, no anything. Let the new person come in and develop the baseline with your input. That would be my suggestion. I don't know what else you can tell us that we don't already know. We spent a lot of money, and our test scores are where it is.
Right, so you know there's keen
Yeah,
interest
so,
in,
yeah.
in the return on investment on the technology. So, you know, there will probably be many questions about that, like we do with your technology plan, evaluation. So, and Dr. Quadros, you're going to say
Yeah, I was
something?
gonna say, I'd include, as you meant, I think your idea is great, use that tool you've got, and definitely do the usage on the different programs, I think that's key. And you could correlate that to the presentation that Dr. Berg gave to the board maybe 6 or so months ago about where our biggest gaps are by school. I think that would be really interesting to see the
Absolutely.
usage per school, and but also show that information we have about the gap, because then you could maybe, you know, draw some conclusions from that.
Something that at least the instructional leaders can focus on.
Right.
If this school is really doing very little academically and they're not using
Right.
the technology, then
Exactly.
maybe you focus on the whys.
Okay. Do we need a motion to not, do we need to have a motion for this? No,
I don't
just-
think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And you know, that doesn't mean that at some point, but I don't know that the parameters and the scope of this one is appropriate at this time.
Sounds good.
Okay, all right.
You know what, Tricia, maybe you, as the chair, should just send a note an email to Dr. Berg and Tanya that the academic committee does not support
Okay.
this contract, just so they're aware of it.
All right,
Yeah,
we'll
we'll
do.
sign it.
Thank you so much for.
You're welcome.
You know, I knew you were here anyway,
Well,
but, you know,
No, it's just.
It's just a proposal, yeah.
Okay,
And I guess copy the board so they know.
okay.
Yes, I'm gonna say, yeah, just copy the board. When you do your, report, even the committee report,
Uh-huh,
next,
for Tuesday?
Yeah, you could just say it there too, but I think it'd be good if Tanya and Dr. Berg had it in writing.
you can just say why we decided not to move forward with it.
Yeah.
Okay, will do. All right, Dr. Kia Campbell, you are up. Would it be beneficial to project it? To display it?
I don't have to.
Okay.
Is everybody has a copy of it? Is that all right? Oh, make it simple. Okay.
What are you starting with? Which one?
On the agenda, the alternative education plan.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, can I just ask you, but the plan is derived from the regulations, right?
Yes.
So,
The state requires us to submit a plan, alternative education plan, program plan, annually.
but what drove this plan are the regulations, right?
Yes.
So would it be okay if we start with the regulations?
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yes.
So do you want to start with the
Yeah, so
right choices or the promising students?
we are going to, we actually have them combined into one.
Oh, okay,
document.
new one, it's a new stuff.
Yes,
Got it.
yes.
Got it. Okay, I just will keep my old one out because that's where I have my notes.
So what started this conversation, and you all have this document, I don't want to read, but just kind of give you a little history. Due to our changes with our alternative programs this last semester, we realized quickly that our administrative regs needed updating. A lot of it referred to Allen's Academy, and we wanted to make sure that we were operating with administrative regulations that was current where we are. So that is basically why we're here. So with that, we started back in April just reaching out to the State Department and just saying, hey, we need to make changes to our regs, but we want to make sure that we're in alignment with the state as it relates to the alternative program. So we had them, 2 people from the State Department that work in intervention, the Office of Intervention Department, Avian Coleman and Barbara Drayton, who works with the Special Education Department. They spent 4.5 hours with our alternative program committee, and I'll tell you, everyone at the district level that touches it in some sort was a part of the meeting, and I'll give you some of the names. Terry Bennett, he acts as our hearing officer. Kiki Swinton and myself, we work with the alternative placement plan. Wendy, legal. We had Carmen Dillard, who works with the PSP, the Promising Students Program. Jerry Henderson, because she's the secondary director. So everyone that had some connection to a part of our K-12, 212 alternative program were a part of that. We felt like we needed to meet and get our ducks in a row as it related as a district, and then begin to build in opportunities to get feedback on what our plans are for the future for our program. Because there are lots of needs, and we want to make sure.
Do it right.
Yeah, we want to do it right. So this, for the most part, is the foundation work. We thought we wanted to start with the state regs and then align that to our regs, our operating documents, so that we can do it right and make sure that it's a very transparent process, that we bring this, and we believe that this process isn't going to stop today. We're going to continue to bring information to the academic committee, provide the feedback, so that we can be successful. It's about our kids, and we want to do it the right way. So that's the reason why we're here today. So we started back in April. April 23rd is when the 2 women from the State Department came. And they provided us a PowerPoint presentation. The PowerPoint was extremely long, but it was basically all of the regs related to what is the minimum requirement to have an alternative program, a secondary alternative program. Keep in mind, the program that we are describing today is a program that really is the intervention for behavior. We're not talking about academics, but behaviors. Kids or students in our district that are violators, like drug usage, possession, alcohol, and I have a list of what we operate. This is a document that we use.
This is a document that we need to revise.
Yes, we need
And
to
we have a lot
revise.
of work to do on it.
Exactly, but these are the kids that we see through the right choices. So I just want to kind of give you the history of that. So when we met with the 2 women, we realized we had a lot of work to do, a lot of work. In some incidents, we were out of compliance, issues with due process in our process, how we process things. So we had an opportunity to be very transparent about our process, and they were upfront with suggestions. It wasn't written, all verbal, because they do an annual report, and they said when they come back, they expect to see some of these changes. So it's really given us an opportunity to ask questions, build the right foundation for our students, so that we are successful with the program. All right. So I know that we've had some exchanges with the academic committee, with our edits. Thank you. Yes, I appreciate it. We did.
It helped us.
It helped us. It helped guide our work. And again, this is a document that, we did not want to make it so tight. I'll explain what I'm trying to say. We're in the midst of transition with instructional services chief officer as well as our superintendent. So we wanted a way that we can clean up what we have based on things that we know don't exist anymore, but keep it where when we have our new leadership, it will give them the flexibility to operate in our process or make changes that really doesn't change the process while we're in the process for the new school year. I don't know if that makes sense. So it's kind of like
We gotta keep on doing our business.
yes,
We have to. It
we
has to
can.
be
I
done.
couldn't wait until August to bring this to you. So there were some deadlines. So we have a deadline which we're going to talk about the plan. That's July the 12th. So this impacts the deadline. So I don't know how we want to do it. So are we going to talk about each of the edits, or do you want, we accepted all of your feedback from the email.
Oh, did you?
Yes,
Okay.
the
I mean,
10
because it was
items.
just, you could have thrown a lot of it out,
Right.
but it was just when I was reading through it, it was the
Right,
questions.
so
that I
we
had.
accepted all of your feedback from
Okay.
the email. So what this is really a copy after the feedback that you provided. We then made those edits. And then in some of those questions that you provided, I felt like there were
Some of them were questions.
questions, and I wanted
Yes.
to be able to answer those questions
Okay.
for you, if that was okay.
So what you have before you right now is the admin reg IS 60-E1. And then we also have the Thompson Student Program, which is 60-2. And
Right.
what you see is the old AR. Strike through means we struck through something in the current AR, and then the red underline is where we've added information. So everything about the Islands Academy School, all that's redlined. So it's kind of, and then, and you may find that there's still some typos in there, I don't know.
So,
Yeah.
in question number 4, Ms. Fidricks, you asked the question, how does the home school know if a student is absent or not, so that the absent is recorded accurately in Power School? So my response to you is that the process that we currently have in place now is that we take attendance at the alternative program, and every principal, assistant principal, data specialist, social worker, and district administrator is emailed a Google link with that attendance. The data specialist at the home school then implements that information into Power School every day. And I gave you, and just for show, the link looks like this, so everyone gets the link. It has all of the kids with absent, if they're absent. So that's how we collect it. The information is sent to schools by the beginning, the first 15 minutes of the last period of the day. So they receive it around 2:30, 2:45 each day.
And that gives an opportunity for them to identify those students
Right.
that were there at least 51% of the day. Because those students will get credit for being there
Right.
the entire.
Correct. So that's how we do it.
That's how-
And the reason why, I just want to clarify, being that we have a program is different than a school. So that means that kids who enter into Right Choices, they are still attached to their home school.
Right.
Grades, attendance, and discipline is collected at the home school. They are still a part of that student body. So I look at it like a kid who's a homebound student. That kid may not be at the actual school. The teacher, the homebound teacher is the facilitator, but the teacher of record is still responsible for grades, attendance, and that sort of thing. So the attendance part, we have to do it because we have to physically see the person, but that information is then entered in at the home school. Yes. All right, question, I think it was 5. Students enrolled at Right Choices are able to continue at ACE. That was a question.
That was a question.
So
Yeah.
the answer to that is no. They're not able to attend ACE.
Okay, you know, would be so helpful, could you refer which,
Okay.
what
Yes,
Roman numeral
I'll do that.
and what letter?
Okay,
Because for Kathy and.
I got
because
you.
didn't-
I'm sorry.
yeah.
I didn't know how
Oh, I
this
know this
unfolded. So
That's why
I
I
was just
wasn't
like,
sure if it would have been better, but,
okay.
so,
So Roman numeral 2, B3 is where I am with ACE.
okay,
Okay? So to answer the question, the
that I.
answer,
yeah,
yes, is no. ACE is considered a part of the regular school environment.
Right,
Therefore, students are placed, at the Right Choices program. So they have to fulfill their assigned days, and then once they're fulfill their assigned days, they can return. So kids who go to ACE, we work with the teachers and administrators there. They get an abbreviated assignment. Usually we work through Google Classroom. Sometimes that may not work where they have to have an assignment in front of them, but we try to, in most cases, try to provide the abbreviated assignment for them. So no, they are separate from the general education, and because ACE is a part of their schedule, they don't attend ACE.
okay. I just, when I was reading that, just the way it was written, The Right Choice Program Director will coordinate with the student's homeschool administrator to ensure that the students enrolled in K courses are able to continue these courses without disruption to include homeschool. The way I read it, and it might be just the way I, it sounds like they
It
can
does,
still
it
go
can
to
be
ACE.
confusing, right.
So-
No, they're separate.
Okay.
That's a part of
Okay,
them having that, a
Right.
placement.
right. I assume so, I mean, we removed the general
Right.
population.
Okay. So, Roman numeral 2B5, I think there was a question, who develops the behavior plan and the IGP, homeschool or right choices? So, of course, the IGP is generated or initiated at the homeschool. A lot of times we get kids throughout the year, so that tends to happen before they get there. But we work with the alternative program and those stakeholders that are involved in the IGP process. But it normally is initiated at the homeschool for IGP. Behavior,
IGPs have to be completed in 8th grade by February, is that correct?
yes, but it's ongoing where there's checkups and that sort of thing. Things, yes,
So
annually.
if a child comes to you at the beginning of 8th grade, who writes that IGP? Because that's the first year they have one, right? I can see in
Right,
9th
right,
and
right.
10th grade because it's continuing.
Right,
So
right.
who writes it, right?
So we work with the school on that. We will work with the school counselor, along with
Okay.
the teachers that are at the Right Choices, develop that. But that has occurred,
Okay.
where that IGP, it's still initiated at the homeschool, but it may be done at Right Choices.
Yeah, okay,
Okay?
all right. And the same thing with counseling?
What's the
Is it
question?
if a child on an IEP, let's say, or even a 504, requires counseling, all right? The homeschool counselor has to
Yes.
come provide the counseling.
Yes.
Is that really the best
No.
use of our counselors'
So,
time?
we-
To drive from Hilton Head
Yes,
to
ma'am.
Right Choices to provide counseling services?
And it's usually
Yes,
15 minutes.
like
long.
yes.
30 minutes.
20 minutes.
You are reading my mind. So
Well, I mean,
the
it's-
proposal for the next year is that we do have a school counselor on site. If we are going to provide the rehabilitation and the social emotional component that is necessary, because a lot of that is what's the deficiency, we need to have a school counselor. And with the changes with the credentialing for graduation requirements, it's really necessary that we don't lose any kid when
Right.
they're at Right Choices,
Right.
because we don't have a school counselor.
Exactly.
So I would definitely advocate that we have that person as a part of the staff for next year. So I know this is budget and season, but if we're talking about the best way to serve kids, that would definitely be an important part
Right.
of service.
Okay, great. And so I see we're on the new copy that you did and created at the students' homeschool.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, ma'am. All right,
All
and
right.
then,
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Number 7, are we going to number
Yes.
7? Okay.
May be required or will be required for the behavior plan. So the question is, yes, it is a requirement to have a behavior plan for all students.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, so this is the part that I do want to clarify.
Will be required.
Mhm.
Right.
So alternative placement is really in lieu of expulsion. So kids who, a principal could recommend expulsion, but they decided to recommend alternative placement. So those kids funnel into our Right Choices program. But there are 2 other categories of students. Students who have gone through the MTSS process and they're at the Tier 3 intervention, and they document it in a dredge. A lot of times our middle school students fall in that category, more so than high school. Right Choices is at Tier 3 intervention. So a lot of times we look at the documentation for that, and that may be a placement for behavior. For behavior. So I just want to let you know, they're the violators that are there, as well as a Tier 3, a lot of times middle school students. And then the third would be our re-entry students, students who are at DJJ that re-enter into our school. There's not a wholesale that we place all kids there, because we look at individual kids and make a decision. We meet with parents, sometimes it's the dynamics. Why were they at DJJ? It might have been a brawl in a community,
Right.
and that kid is at Right Choices. So we're not gonna put the kid
Right.
at Right Choices. They're gonna go, so we make an individual decision about placement for them. But that's another group of students that could go to Right Choices. For example, it was a mom that met with Swinton and I, and she said to us, he hasn't had any formal, well, he's been in DJJ for 18 months. I can't see him back at a high school right
Just
now.
drop him on the door.
I can't see that. Can you please put him at Right Choices for a couple of weeks so he can get acclimated? Of course, we made that. So that's what I'm saying. It really depends on the student and how we determine that placement.
Okay, Ms. Rabbi?
Yeah, it also says in here, in Right Choices Program A, it says students who may be considered for entry into the program may include students
Yes, we corrected that.
learning to repulsion, long-term suspended, chronically truant, disengaged learners. How are you supposed to find disengaged learners?
Yeah, being that we dismantled Islands Academy, we may need to revisit that and probably take that out.
I thought that the state required, if we were going to have an alternative program, that it needed to satisfy both reasons for alternative programs, behavior and academics. I thought section 5963.
Kathy,
she's talking about-
while you're looking that up, we have some exciting news. Yes, we have someone with us. I didn't know you snuck in, and I just kept on going. I'd like to introduce Dr. Kimberly Hobley. Well, this is Dr. Kimberly Hobley, who is going to be the director of our alternative school.
Program.
No problem. You just found out? I mean, I emailed you at 11 o'clock.
Well, we drove, we went to Sylvania last night, and I said, well, we need to find a place to stay. So we came back today, and they said you had to sleep in.
Fabulous. Welcome.
It's a great first
Please.
impression.
Yeah, no, but if if you've got any ideas, you can see it's very casual and we just want, we
wonder you asked for
need
it.
to have this.
I didn't have anything. I loved it. We were headed to Florida and Atlanta.
Absolutely.
So
Yes. We want to go around and we'll introduce ourselves.
Christy Robinson, Director of Instructional Technology. I work very closely with the Right Choice Program because they use Edgenuity a lot for their curriculum.
Kiki Swinton, Director of Student Services, and we'll be working closely on a lot of different things.
I'm Wendy Cartledge, staff attorney, and I look forward to working with you. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Earl Campbell, school board member.
Dr. Christina Guads, I'm the board chair.
William Smith, school board member.
Al Campbell, school board member, and academic committee member.
Kathy?
Kathy Robine, school board, and academic committee member. Sitting in Boston.
Baby sitting in Boston, that's great.
Member but chair of the academic committee.
And I'm Robin, I'm the executive assistant to the school board.
I'm Terry Bennett, I'm Director of Grants Township / hearing officer.
I'm Rachel Jones, I'm the education reporter for the town paper.
Great. Oh,
We're very excited to have you.
I didn't want to interrupt the meeting, I just wanted to come
I
get information.
thought you were probably a parent.
Oh.
Taking all these notes.
I will be a parent.
Yes, so.
Great, that's something that
Kathy, I'm sorry, would you repeat the reference you were talking about?
I'm trying to find it again, but
It's in A, so
clearly certain that alternative programs had to meet the needs of two categories of students. Students for behavior and students for academics, which would be the disengaged learners.
the academic piece would have been our alternative school.
School, and that's what we need to rethink. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Kiki.
So,
It says in section 59, 63, 1300, alternative school programs established. These programs shall be designed to provide appropriate services to students who, for behavioral or academic reasons, are not benefiting from the regular school program.
the state regulations that, right?
Yeah, reference state regulations.
I was looking, I was looking.
1300.
Right. So, okay. Ms. Robin, I was just gonna share that initially the Islands Academy program, school that we had was for that academic piece. Now, the Right Choices program that we have is actually for behavioral. So it's not, I mean, we support the academic progress of students, but
think about the kids that we serve in Right Choices. We need to isolate them from our general population for a period of time to rehabilitate. So we need to serve our academic.
With the state regulation.
Right, Kathy, I was gonna bring that up too.
Yes.
So you have to send this in July 12th, and it has to align with the state regs.
Yes.
And in the state regs, it says.
What we'll do after this.
Right, Kathy?
We will,
Yeah,
we'll follow back up with AV. I just feel like if we were to move forward, I think that separating the two, the academic behavior, would be beneficial. The way that we serve our students in that setting. That's just my opinion. When you do surveys around the district, because I've had conversations with, I would say 4 to 5 districts in the state of South Carolina, they serve the kids in a program. Academic is separate from behavior. I'm just, that's how they serve it. Like, for example, in Horry County, they have a Phoenix program. No, I'm sorry, Richland 1, they have a Phoenix program, which is the academic, and then they have a separate program for the behavior. So we want to be aligned to the state, but I just want us to really think about what that makeup will look like as we move forward, if we want this to be successful.
and that goes back to the point that Dr. Campbell made before. This is not the last time that we'll be
Yes,
coming to this
we're gonna-
committee. So as we're seeking input from the new director, as we're seeking input from the state, from you all, we'll come back to the committee with recommendations that we have to make this document meet the needs of our students.
What we found out is that this should have come to the board in previous years, and it didn't. So I was like, it hasn't, so we need to bring this to the board. So that is why I'm just gonna be transparent. This was something that was delivered to me in August, the alternative program. So I am digging and finding and trying to make this the best program that we possibly can. But when we rebuild, I wanna make sure that we rebuild the program the right way. And so that was my whole intent, is starting with the state, is just being transparent. This is where we are, this is what we wanna do to get better. How can you help us get there? And so I want to not only have the district and principals, but the board members as well. I mean, these are the kids that we want to be successful. So this is why this is gonna be an ongoing conversation.
Clarification.
Yes.
All right, Kathy read the specs, and I don't know why, that's an issue, because we had 2 programs already.
But one was
Right
a school.
Choices.
One was a school.
And Highland Academy.
Yeah.
Right, it's school, whatever you call it, it's alternative
Right.
school. And I guess what you're saying is one program is for remediation academically, which Right Choices is not.
Right. It's just
So,
focus on the behavior.
I think what Kathy is asking, well, what happens to those students that you just defined as disengaged and need academic support, which, is a fine line many times academically, because the ones who need academic support will be the one who misbehaves.
I agree.
But those students should be identified through the multi-tier system of support program. So through response to intervention is what we used to have RTI. Those students should have been supported by an academic and behavioral plan. That's what I
Should have been.
should
All
have.
right, that's a good optimum word. All right, bottom line is, what have we got built into this for those children?
Right, so that is why I think it's 2 pieces. We close a school, but we need to revisit that. Like, is this going to be a joint juncture where the kids are together? We need your guidance on that, and we want to make sure that we do it the right way. The reason why the school was not successful, this is Nakia speaking to the committee. once we identified ourselves as a school, we are still held accountable to the same standards as the comprehensive high schools and middle schools. And so in other states, it's a little different. They look at alternative schools and they have their rating for alternative schools.
Yes.
Beaufort County was the only district that had an alternative school. So we are playing with the word school and program, doing the
Yes.
same thing. So all I'm saying is this: we need a program, not say a school again,
Right.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
did what we wanted Islands Academy to do
Right.
for our kids.
Yeah.
And so that is where we are. We need a program to support the academics.
Or ignore the reports
Right.
from the state.
Either or. Because
Yeah.
we're held accountable
Right.
to the same, right.
Right.
So I want to put that out there. Based on my research, and y'all know I come every month to do the update for Islands Academy. We lose 1 or 2 kids every time I do the report. And it's because we need a program to support them between the school, between their high school and before they drop out. I mean, every time I come, it's 1 or 2 kids that unenroll, but we know what that means. So I just feel like this is where we are. I want to do the work. It's just that I don't want to make the similar mistakes that we did in the past. I want us to have a foundation that is positive, that's supportive, that includes all those wraparound services that we say these kids need. Let's do it. Let's do it the right way. I think
No, I
this-
agree. My only concern, and I think Kathy, this could be yours too, is that do you think the state will accept this plan July 12th when it is not
So-
speaking to the fact that it says
So-
that must be a part of it?
So this is what I'll do. So Aveen Coleman did the audit from the state back in March. We got all meets on the audit. And she only came to evaluate the Right Choices program, not Owls Academy. So she understands where we are with that. So what I can do after this meeting is reach out to her and just say, hey, I know this is due July 12th. This is what our plan is as now. Does this meet the state requirements based on our,
5960.
yes, 59,
I
right.
think, Kathy, did you hear that?
And I can do that and then follow back up with the committee.
I
And how
think
we
that's-
can improve it.
Huh?
Then how we
Yeah,
can
I
improve
would
it.
Right, right, right.
ask that you get that in writing.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Listen.
Yeah.
Yes, every time I communicate, I try to get things in writing. And
Yeah,
that,
great.
yes, ma'am, I will do that.
Are you going to ask about the typical children from Island Academy? What, is that gonna be a part of this Right Choices plan? Or are they on hold now? Are you waiting for us to give direction to that?
So can I just put this out?
And first question, earlier question about Island Academy. How many of those children are in there, or do you know, because of solely academics, disengagement?
So, when we closed Islands Academy, we had a total of 68 kids that were on the roster. They did go through a screening process and an application process. We did look at enriched data. I don't want to say 100%, but I would say out of 68 kids, 60 of the 68 were identified based on academics. That would
I
be,
just wanted to
yes.
create a baseline.
So
the-
if we move in the direction of a program, please keep in mind that the staffing may look different than what we have currently just for Right Choices. Okay.
Quick question. How many kids are we allowed to have in the Right Choices program? Is there a state statute law per class and all that?
So that's a really good question. So in our old regs, we wrote for Owls Academy that we would not have more than 250 kids in the program
At a time?
at a time. But that was Islands Academy.
That's the school, right?
Yeah, that's the
Okay,
school.
yeah.
Mhm. Now with Right Choices, we have to serve kids as they come. You get where I'm going? So, for example, I can't control if a kid brings a knife to school or drugs. We just have to serve those
We can't
kids.
say we've hit 75 kids.
And we can't take any more kids.
Right. And I understand, but my concern there is, how many staff members do we in turn to have put over there? Because one thing about it is we don't want to put the staff members back in jeopardy.
Yeah, good question. So when I talked to Aveen and Barbara Drayton on the April 23rd, they gave us a PowerPoint that articulated the minimum requirement to open or have an alternative program. And that was basically 4 course, no, go ahead. That was in the plan, yes. It was 4 core subject areas, math, science, social studies, ELA, and then if you serve special education students, the special education, and that was it. That's the minimum requirement. And they recommend that the certified teachers be high school certified because they can teach down in middle school. So that was the minimum requirement. My recommendation, and just again, I'm trying to be an advocate for the program, but then also the sensitivity of our budget and cuts and that sort of thing. So my recommendation was that we, of course, have the 4 content. We have at least 2 middle school teachers, maybe dual certified math, science, English, social studies, so that'll be 6. Have our school counselor that we desperately need. The BMS that's currently there, a director, and an office manager to kind of facilitate the intake, because it gets kind of crazy. I'm sorry.
Mr. Smith, can I just ask, could we finish the regulations first?
Yeah.
Because all of what you're asking is inside the plan, and it's laid out in an order.
And it has the
Would that be okay? Because then we can, once the regulations, then that's what.
Awesome. Also, back to when y'all were moving, I had a question. I thought you were going to recognize me. When y'all were on B, it was B, maybe B 3.6 or something. She was telling us upon how the students can be in the program, basically as in, I guess, either they go for a hearing. Were you telling us that back in that?
So how they're placed there?
Right. Right. There are 2 different ways.
So it's 4 actually.
Okay, it's 4 different ways.
4 different ways.
Right.
So the hearing officer, if a principal recommends expulsion,
Right.
the hearing officer has 4 decisions.
Right.
He can either uphold the recommendation,
Right.
where the kid is expelled from school.
Right.
He can recommend them not uphold the decision from the principal, but the kid goes to the alternative setting or return back to homeschool.
Right.
So they can be placed there from the hearing officer. They can be placed there through the alternative placement, which is Ms. Swinton and myself. The IEP team can make a decision because that's we can't place a student who has an IEP. So the IEP team makes a decision if that is the correct placement.
Right.
So an IEP team can make a placement.
Right.
And then we talked briefly about re-enrollment students that come from an alternative setting or DJJ.
Right.
We may make a placement there, or incarceration.
Right.
So those are the 4
Right.
pathways there.
Well, I was actually, to be more specific, my question was actually when y'all do like the packets. Now, when we do those packets, my question was basically, I guess y'all reach out and talk to the parents if y'all have questions for the packets.
Good question. So that came up in our conversation with the State Department.
We're changing it.
And we have to change our process.
Okay.
And because what they said, based on what our process and practice, we did not give students true due process.
Due process, right there.
Okay.
That's okay.
And that was something that they said verbally, but they are going to get to us when they come back if we don't correct the process.
We are correcting
So with that, we referred to, at this time, about 215 students to the alternative program through the course of the year, not at one time, but through the course of the year. So what that's going to do is going to add additional time to this process where we have to meet with each parent, hear their side. So we just
Where is that in our ARs? Is
the
that
process.
spelled out?
Well, the
What
process
the
is
process
that
is for
For intake?
No, because
Yeah.
we're actually updating our process. So
we have to redo the student
Yes.
code of conduct.
Yeah, it was
We've got to redo that as well as the procedures for discipline. So
Okay.
that has all got to be redone.
and that would be a part of that, not necessarily a part of
of
the
this operation of the program. Yeah, that's more like the process.
Okay.
Mhm. But this was all
a part of
a
that
part of
same
that conversation.
Sure.
They're just telling us, they're giving feedback on our process.
Yeah.
This process does not really give due process to the students. So we know that's the work that we have to do.
Okay.
So pretty much, we're gonna have a hearing officer that will see students with a recommendation for expulsion. And then we will have parents we will have principals meet with us along with parents if the recommendation is in lieu of expulsion, placement of right choices. So same process, just different placement.
The hearing officer is not the same one that we struck.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, we'll talk about that.
just saying.
So I just want
Big one.
to. This is really good because I was like, oh my God, 212 hours.
No, Mr. Campbell.
We gotta figure out how we gonna put 212 hours in our work.
Kathy,
Yes, sir.
I want to let you know Dr. Rodriguez joined us.
Oh, great.
Okay. Okay.
Let me ask a question.
Mhm.
If we decide to have an alternative school, wouldn't that would solve our problem?
Not school. Mr.
No,
Campbell.
wait a minute.
Okay, okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
If we were to have an alternative school, we would solve the behavior, we would solve the behavior and the academic problem. Look at Georgia,
You're right.
and they've been doing it for years.
This is just my caution. I just want to make sure that Beaufort doesn't set themselves up for failure. You have a State Department that's telling us not to do something. They're not putting it in writing, but they're telling us, don't do this. Don't create the school, do a program. We don't have other models of that. And this is what they're telling us. I just feel like they may not give us the fair shake as it relates to our kids, but that's just me.
That's the history so far, and that's why the big impact with the alternative school. Numbers were so low, but the numbers weren't low in terms of that particular kind of set.
Right.
Numbers were low in terms of the total school spectrum, so when you attach school to it, they're looking at it like it's a regular school.
Now, the State Department Sumter had an alternative school.
You said Sumter?
Sumter did. Those students, they wore uniforms every day.
I'll reach out to AV.
I don't know whether they still have it now or not, but they did some years ago.
How did it affect it?
Behavior school, or was it
Behavior,
academic alternative or behavior, both?
Both of them.
I mean, we're not saying it wouldn't be effective, because I think you're right, it'd be effective. Now, how did those numbers that the State Department sent back to Sumter from that school affect Sumter's overall number? See, that's the dynamics here. That was the dynamics of why Highland Academy was closed.
And I'm gonna put this out here, because I have this data that I collected this over the course. So we had about 215 kids that were placed at Right Choices through the placement committee. 84%, these aren't figures that you are surprised about, but 84% of those students were male. 60% of those students were African American students, 19 Hispanic students. So we just need to make sure that we are not, the perception of it looks right. The perception of how we serve our kids looks right.
What number of those were students with special needs?
You would ask that question.
Well, I imagine it might be a high.
Right.
5%.
Mostly 8th and 9th grade.
Oh, you got it. Are you reading my chart? Yeah, so,
It's a resounding yes.
yeah.
That's when they start drawing.
So I have a monthly report that I will probably have to get you that information.
That's okay.
Yes,
That's right.
but I know last month, yes.
So you're gonna,
The other
you're gonna
thing-
work with our new schedule?
Yes.
The other piece that might be interesting to look at is how many of those kids are behind grade level.
Oh, yes. What we found is the kids that enter in, like, not all 212, but a lot, the patterns that we see, the kids are reading below 2, 3 grade levels behind. Yes, and then we have a pattern within our district. A lot of the students that come through the alternative program on the southern side of the district are placed because of drugs. A lot of the kids on the northern side are placed there because they've gone through the tiered system, or it's chronic fights, that sort of thing. So, I mean, we see patterns. We do see patterns. So the reason why I mention that is that our needs are different in the district, so our support should mirror the needs
And
of
it
the
also
kids.
gave us an opportunity to look at what additional supports,
That
what
we need.
wraparound services we need to bring in. We need to focus more on working closely with Beaufort County Alcohol and Drug Abuse Department. And have them, maybe somebody stationed in the schools to provide more support to the
Right.
classroom teachers so that they're able to identify what to look for. More support to, we need to look at the way that we provide support and just step back from the way that we've been doing it.
It can't be this punishment mentality.
No.
We have to develop
There's a reason why, and
Yes.
so it might be the social work,
Right.
it's the therapeutic,
Right, the
like
therapeutic,
counselor.
exactly.
You know, every time you say that, I want to get on to high five you.
I mean, that's the only way to decrease the recidivism of it,
Right.
because we know these kids, it's a revolving.
We have to
door.
meet them where they are.
That's right.
That is the new
Yep.
Yes. So
It's not my new focus, but it is the new focus of everybody.
Yeah.
It's
So,
the buzzword
are we
all of a
good
sudden,
then?
but I've been
Make the
screaming for a
changes
while.
for-
I'll do that.
Okay.
And I will follow up with Aideen Coleman about the disengaged
Yes, for that
academic
academic
part.
Because I've been paying for this whole plan, which we haven't even touched yet, but
Yes.
to be rejected because the academic part was not, I mean, just that conversation, like Happy said, get it in writing. Is a good idea. So do you want to go over the ARs for the Promising Student Program?
All right, keep going. Okay.
Okay?
All right. So you'll see that some of our regulations, what we talked about mainly was that we needed to add a component for students who violated the code of conduct with the Safe Schools Act violation. Because what we found was the PSP program was initially built for those tier 3 students to be able to have that support at the elementary level, so grades 2 through 5. And that's at the back of this packet, I'm sorry.
And Kiki, where is this housed? Where's the site for
So,
PSP?
right now, as of last school year, we had sites at Well Branch Elementary School and Red Cedar Elementary School.
They're within a school.
Yes.
They're not
So
separate.
they're housed.
Okay.
Yeah, Red
Correct. The
Cedar and
programs-
Rail Branch?
Correct. We have lobbied for an additional program on this side of the county, so we will continue to have a program at Well Branch Elementary School. We will also have a program at Coosa Elementary School. And then we're looking at what school will house the program on the southern side of the county. So we're going to have 3 sites next year for Promising Student Program.
And what was the determining factor of the sites? Is it the number of students from those schools, or is it the physical ability
was
for those
logistics,
schools?
yeah.
Just space.
It's just
Okay.
space.
Okay.
So we have added the ability to now be able to place students who have violated a Safe Schools Act violation at the elementary level. We
We've
did
seen
not have
those.
that process before. So if we had a student who violated a Safe Schools Act violation, we had a student, 2 students unfortunately, who called in a very specific threat to a school. And we had to think outside of the box how we could serve them, because of course the principal was saying, well, why can't they go to PSP? Well, our admin rules don't allow for that because they have to be a tier 3 student. And these students, this was a one-time act, so we adjusted the admin rule to definitely be able to meet that need. I'm trying to think of anything else that we added. Of course, we're changing from response to intervention to a multi-tiered system of support. And you did ask us some questions
I
in
didn't,
regards.
many of the same kinds of questions, like, because
Who
what-
develops the behavior
right,
plan?
because, sometimes there's that chasm between the homeschool and the Right Choices program, or whatever it might be, and it's like, well, I thought you were gonna do that, well, no, I thought you, and if it's not spelled out in the
Sure.
ARs,
Can't hold them
you
accountable.
can't hold them accountable, and, that just comes to
Absolutely. And it's the same thing with Right Choices. These students are still tied to their homeschool. They may be placed outside of their homeschool, but they're still tied to their homeschool. So the initiation of any plans with regards to behavior, academics, all of those things are done through the homeschool. Now, as a team, we all meet, sit down at the table, myself and Carmen Dillard are a part of that process to ensure that what we create, the plan that we're creating, the goals we create, we actually adhere to those. We're providing the interventions to be able to support those students.
And for state accountability purposes, they're tied to the homeschool for
Yes.
Yes.
assessments?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
I think that's the piece.
Yep.
That's the piece Tricia was more referring to. I'm concerned about that part of it. The assessment and that being a continuous trend. Students who go to Right Choice never get their work turned in back to the regular school or the grades submitted, and they come back, at a serious disadvantage because they're at Right Choices for 45 days, and it's almost a stigmatization on top of the stigmatization. You can't pass now because you're at Right Choices.
Yeah.
And where's your work?
So I'll share a quick personal story with you. My son just graduated
Yeah.
on June 5th. he violated the code of conduct, was placed at Right Choices for 45 days. Terry, stop looking at me. Stop looking at me, Terry. But this is a prime example of how this happens and how we need to work on tightening the process.
So she's looking at it from a parental perspective.
Yes, from a parental perspective. Forget that I have the other side of it. So he is enrolled in 2 Project Lead the Way courses. Throughout his time at Right Choices, there was always a battle. He's not turning in his work. He did turn in his work to the teacher. And there was 600 emails that went back and forth before he was able to receive his credit for the work that he completed while he's there. Yes. So that shows from a parental perspective where I can have that input to say, we need to look at how we tighten this
And most
process.
kids are not gonna have that advocate fighting.
I had 23 years in the classroom, and I've mostly dealt with the Right Choices children. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
But it identifies where we need to tighten up.
Yeah, somewhere we're missing the boat.
Is there a way through like Google Classroom
Yeah,
that
so
they can kind
there
of?
should be.
So there is, and most of the schools use Google Classroom to post assignments, and we have a program called Edgenuity that is full curriculum that we use for credit recovery and initial credit for
those
courses.
courses that are offered.
But courses
your
like
ACEs,
Project Lead the Way
classes.
and a lot of the K classes don't have those. They're most of the core curriculum classes. So that is where they should be using Google Classroom. Some
That'll go right back to the teacher
Some
when
are-
they turn it in.
Yes.
Well, and we have that procedure set up, and the schools are supposed, the teachers are supposed to be posting those assignments in Google Classroom, and that is an expectation we established when we closed Islands and made that a priority for Right Choices, but
So we can't
not all
penalize-
of the teachers are doing what they need to do.
We can't penalize kids.
You know, can I add
for that.
something here?
Sure.
I think it's back to that same old thing we've been talking about before, that accountability piece. I was taking a tour of Right Choices earlier this year, and a student was totally frustrated because his teacher from his homeschool was supposed to send him work to do through the, assignments, and his Right Choices teacher said, okay, get out there, and there's a form. He said, they're not there. And you said, I communicated with your teacher today, and he said, they're not there.
Yeah.
And sure enough, they weren't there. So,
Yeah, and that has always historically been a problem. So tell you what, why don't we finish the promising
Yes,
students and you can
yes.
go back to that for the Right Choices? Because these are the little ones.
Some of the questions that you had, of course, were about the behavior plan and who develops those, which is created by
Right.
the team, but also it's held at the homeschool. Another question was about we put periodically for the transition meetings.
Yeah.
So we actually have been meeting in the past every 6 weeks.
Okay.
And what that does is that allows us 30 days to provide those interventions, do progress monitoring, and determine whether those interventions are working.
Right.
So
And the
not
only reason-
necessarily tying it to the 4.5 weeks, halfway through.
It was just the only reason if it's not
Yes.
not written somewhere, then it doesn't happen.
So we
And
took
so-
your
Okay.
recommendation on that.
Okay.
We were here on Friday trying to make sure. Okay, Ms. Fisher sent us in, so we got to make sure we go through line by line. to
I
make
said, we're trying to be the last edit.
Right, right. Another question, okay, so line
Focus
number
on
3.
special education.
Yes.
Yes.
So with regards to staffing, the teacher, and we worked with Reggie D, who just popped in for a second, to identify the teachers, the type of teacher that will qualify to serve the PSP program. And that teacher does have what he said, a focus in special education, and this didn't
What
change.
does that
We
mean,
changed.
though? What does it mean to have a focus in special education?
Now, that's a human resources question. I don't want to try to even answer that. I will defer to
Certified
Reggie.
elementary teacher with a focus in
In
special education.
I mean, experience.
So is
what
that,
with inclusion?
is that a certification?
Isn't it like an endorsement?
Is that an endorsement? Yeah.
Certification?
I don't
So
think there
there
are
was-
endorsements for special
this is-
education.
No, I mean, you're called class,
My guess
classes,
is probably
you're certified to be special ed.
Right. So I just, I think, are these ARs going to the state also or just?
No, this is local.
Okay. I mean, that is an HR thing, but it's just kind of an interesting word.
The read to succeed endorsement, that was changed.
some
Read to
states
succeed.
do have minors in special education.
Yes.
You can have your elementary certificate with you're not certified in special ed, but you have a minor in that. So,
And Kathy, maybe that's what it means. Yeah.
And we can get
Yeah.
assure definition of that from Reggie.
It's-
The other thing that will be added
Yeah.
to number 4, where we have the reading certification, that's actually been changed, and I don't know how it got missed, but it'll say a Read to Succeed endorsement.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So it won't,
So
it will
that
no
is an
longer be a reading
endorsement.
certification, we'll change that
Okay.
before we finalize this, once
Yeah.
we have your approval from the
Yeah, because
committee
you might
and the
have
board.
some other draft
Yes.
revisions you want us to do.
And so that really is all that we had with regards to, thanks for his clarifying question, number 8.
You guys, I need to sign off.
Okay, Kathy,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, I'll talk to you later, Trish.
Okay,
All right, good work, guys.
appreciate you.
All right,
Ryan.
thank you, Kathy.
in Boston.
Okay, yeah, the only things were like just the wording, students with special needs instead of special ed kid
Yes.
students, you know, I mean, just,
And we went through and changed that, but one other thing is, number 6A, only students, so we took out the word only, because it is students in tier 3, but there are
Yes.
also students who commit the Safe Schools Act violation.
Okay.
And Tricia, did you have another edit you wanted to tell us? Or was it
What I
okay?
did, I just took your edits, the numbers, and then if it was a clarifying question, we got a response.
Mhm.
Everything else was just changes to the document.
So some of what you see struck out, it's just where we kind of tightened up the admin rule and referred back to where it needed to be. And that's all that we had for the promising student program.
Okay. All right, great, so, then we're gonna get into actually the alternative school plan. Not school. Yes.
Alternative program plan.
Before we defeat the promising program, how do we get students there?
We transport, we provide transportation.
Or that's your transportation
Yes,
program?
yes. So what we do is when we are at the intake meeting, I actually go ahead and send the email, and they pick the student up either from their home school or from their home, depending on, because we have some students who were like placed at Well Branch Elementary, but they were on the Robert Small student.
Very true.
They're on a different schedule.
Okay.
So we have to adjust with parents, and so we make it work.
And a BMS and a teacher's at every
Every
TSP?
site, yes.
Every site?
So we need to take the ARs to the board, right? Robin
Yes.
just reminded me, so we need a motion.
Yeah, so I'll do that. So I moved that. Oh, I
Yeah,
can't.
so,
No, I didn't know that was like to the committee. Listen. I didn't know the committee needs to say
Thank you for that tea.
So I have to take that.
Say aye.
So are you keeping that,
No, we can do, you know,
That's
should we
the
make
name.
the motion or should we do it at the next meeting?
At
Which
the
is
next
next
meeting.
week,
Yeah,
on
next
Wednesday.
week.
So you'll get us any of these other, okay.
So we'll get,
Reach
so
out to
there are a
me.
couple of things that we'll do. We'll get the feedback from the State Department and define whether there needs to be an academic component as a part of
Like in
this
that statute.
admin rule.
Okay.
And then, I believe that was it.
I think that was the big thing,
That was
because
it.
they're trying to make it align with the state regs. But there might be some things with this alternate school plan. And so seriously, it's gonna say school, not program?
you say alternate school program?
That's the
Or
way
alternate
that,
program?
that's the way that their document.
document
reads.
says.
Even though we don't want you to use the word school.
Right, so that's the way that their actual, it's actually a, I guess it's like a job
Look at
form.
yourself.
And that's what they created.
But they
It's
tell
not
the school program, yes.
Say problems. Alternative school program.
All right.
All right, so I know I kind of talked about the history with the administrative rules. So the administrative rules kind of got it why we're here with the plan. So I don't want to kind of go over that. But I do want to emphasize that we're trying to be collaborative as possible when we work through this. So like when we're having conversations, we're meeting with finance, meeting with HR to make sure that we're covering all bases as it relates to the plan. So we sent this document, and again, this is a template from the State Department. It is an electronic plan, so basically you hit submit. So Ms. Swinton and I had to copy what was in the document and then make a Word document so we could see it before we hit submit. In the conversation with Aveen Coleman, I found out that a superintendent's signature as well as board approval is needed. So that is why we're here. That was new information, and that was a part of just the research and trying to establish the right foundation as it relates to our alternative program. So we pretty much responded to the questions that were in the plan for the schools. I do want to emphasize that we wanted to make sure that we had people in place, because we feel like it's important that we have our plan. Like this, we're not saying that we're not going to follow this, but we need specific goals that are aligned to our needs within the program that I feel like we're going to work on. So I just want to
Different than the goals that are.
No,
Oh, okay.
just more specific, like based on our student data, like I was saying, we were talking about, like parts of the district, there are kids that come to us a certain way, just making sure that we address those needs in that. So we want to make sure that we kind of capture that.
And it was also important that, because this requires an annual update, a lot of the verbiage that was in last year's plan referred to the operation under Islands Academy.
Right.
So it's important for us to make sure that we, once we've cleaned up the admin rules, that we write a plan that aligns with that.
Where we are now. So there were 4 goals, and when we first did this, I said, Kiki, these goals have to be measurable, but the goals you kind of state, and then underneath the goal, there's the objective that is measurable. And I don't know, do we want to like cover all of this, or is it questions that you
We're going
have?
to sign off on it, I think we
Okay,
definitely need
all
to
right,
cover
all right.
all of it.
So,
Can we just go back to page 1 now?
Mhm.
The program overview, the mission vision, is that aligned with the district mission and vision?
That is the
That is That's exactly.
so
the
we
same.
copy it
So-
directly from the,
Okay, and so then I think my question when I was reading over this is, how is this different? How is this plan just for this program, different than what would be a plan for a behavior concern in school? So just as we go through that, okay, if we can kind of keep that, because I think that's just something that popped in my head, was like, okay, so how is this different? Okay.
so we pretty much copied the mission for the district to satisfy the mission and the vision. And so the statement of need talks about that right choices is intended to provide students the opportunity to develop necessary skills that are transferable to the normal school environment and community. So we had conversations about what we want that to look like. The program serves as an alternative to expulsion, which we talked about briefly today, the 4 pathways to the alternative placement. Yes, for students who have violated the Beaufort County School District Code of Conduct and who are returning from an alternative placement, incarceration, and transferring into Beaufort County from another alternative education.
And didn't you say also placed by an IEP team?
Yes, so.
That isn't that it? Shouldn't that be in there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Placed by an IEP team.
This is why we get
And if we can just go back to the mission, it says the mission of the alternative school. It doesn't say the school district mission. And I just didn't know if that is something they're gonna, it says program overview, state the mission of the alternative school. And so I just was wondering if maybe there shouldn't be something more specific
different.
than they have.
Yeah, we'll.
Okay?
Well,
And it definitely should
and
align
we-
with the district, but
Yes.
because it says that specifically.
Right, but I think that once we have now that we've identified a director of alternatives, I think that it's important for all of us to sit down and be creative, because we don't have that. So I think it would be false of us to just put anything outside of the district's mission and
Make
vision.
sure it's aligned.
Well, you're starting July 1st, and this is due July 12th.
So we have to do it right.
Yeah, so I mean, I just think that a little asterisk and maybe start out with that, but then maybe add something more specific, because it does say the mission of the alternative school. Anyway, just a thought.
Okay, based on the district's historical data, achievement gap, and graduation data, there's a need for a program to support students who meet the criteria for the alternative placement. Students who take full advantage of the services offered through the alternative program are less likely to drop out of school and are more likely to earn a high school diploma. Any feedback?
Please. I want to go back up to the top there, where paragraph right above that. program serves as an alternative to expulsion for students who violated the Beaufort County School District Code of Conduct. Well, every violation there is an expulsionable offense. But, and most of the children you have, you get it right, Justice, from my experience, not that changing. Are not up for expulsion at all. They just violated so many rules in the school until principal decided that we went to our third degree with this person.
So,
We will-
a kid who brings a weapon, the way.
Yeah, no.
Weapon, drugs, aggravated assault, simple assault, bomb threats, weapon, fighting,
Yeah, those are expulsion.
fire alarms, burglary, all these are recommendation for expulsion or assignment to the alternative school. So it could be one or the other by the principal to make that recommendation.
So based
Yeah,
on this,
but I'm
there
saying
would,
that's-
if I violated at
that's
level
true.
3,
Okay.
Yeah, but
You're talking
the
about
majority of
multiple
students that you
suspensions.
have, not in that category. All of those things even you mentioned.
I sent
Majority-
45 of those students to Right Choices
Right,
this year.
most of them
Well, you
are.
said 45, and you had 215?
Right,
But
and
most of them
most of
are.
them do fall in this
Yeah.
category.
What about the kids who just fight or just
They-
disrespect the
They,
teachers
that's it, they
over and
suspended,
over?
they
They're
don't
not coming there
No,
now?
sir, no, sir.
Okay.
That's a level 3.
and that's where we serve as the stopgap.
Right, we
To
stop.
make sure that principals are held accountable,
For
administrators
this.
are held accountable.
Okay,
So if
right.
they submit a
That's
level
what make
3,
sure that's the
Yeah.
case.
Right. So I do want, if they fight, it tells the principal what they can do, up to 6 days of suspension, so that we can have consistency across the district. But most of the
So
kids
they
that,
can suspend the child 6 days now.
up to,
Wow.
up to.
You know,
The principal
you know
can
what wasn't for?
say 1 day.
Oh, it should just
Yeah.
3 days.
No, I mean, you
Because
suspend
6
3, but
days,
it's up to 6
you're
days.
damaging, I mean,
learning
when you
to
give
use
the
your
principal that kind of
early
leverage,
from our-
they're gonna use that 6 days.
So, a question on that, right?
Okay.
So when they're suspended for 6 days, right? Do they have the opportunity to make up their work while they're out
Supposed to.
They're supposed to, yes.
Supposed to have that
Work
opportunity.
at home.
for full credit?
they're supposed to.
Yeah.
Yes.
And with all of everything we have virtual now, they can get their assignments from home.
So like fighting is a level 3, so it tells you if you're K through 5 and you fight, it's up to 4 days. A principal can suspend you 1 day or not suspend you, but up to 4 days. If you fight and you are a 6th through 12th grade student, up to 6 days. So we don't
What if
see,
you fight 3 times?
so that is a possibility, but what we want to look at is documentation. There should be a plan, intervention,
Yeah,
you know.
and you have that meeting,
Right.
and he's recommending the right choice.
Right, but to answer your question about the 215 students that were placed, the majority of those students
Were
fall
those
within this
category?
orange
Okay, all right.
level 4 category.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Hoggle, you were going to say something? You had recommended,
I was just saying
that.
that-
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
That the statement of need could go along with our regulations from the alternative program where you actually specified the 4 ways that can be
Yes.
a little more specific. You could copy and paste that.
Put that in. It's a good
And that
idea.
addresses this point.
Okay, I'm done.
Quick question, just, to go back to, some of what he was talking about. Now, that sheet right there, does every administrator have that sheet right there?
This
This
cheat sheet,
Uh-huh.
they should have this.
Yeah, they have it in
Because
our-
what we do, when we see a kid
Uh-huh.
that comes to us that's ill on a level 3,
Uh-huh.
we're calling and asking questions. Why is this kid coming? Is there any additional information that we need to know about?
Right.
So we refer back to this green sheet.
Right.
But we're gonna
That's actually
update
from the
it.
student code of conduct.
Right,
Every
it comes
student
from,
has
the
it.
student has this.
Right.
Right.
Okay, well, I'm just clarification, so make
Yeah.
these phone calls, and I'm understanding that the process is fair and objective
Right.
to across the board.
But I wanna make sure that, I don't know when you walked in, Mr. Smith, but we have to change our process when it comes to alternative placements. So
Right.
what I'm sharing with you is how we operated in the past, but moving forward, we're gonna have to have a hearing with each of those students and parents before we make a decision about placement.
Right, and I think that, I agree, and I talked to some people, and that's why, how I figured out some of that stuff, but, I do agree with that. Cause a lot of people saying that there was not a due process, and that wasn't correctly. But however.
They could appeal, but it wasn't the due process.
Right. But however, also, my question is, Also, our principals are allowed to call and say, hey, I want to send this student over, and are we accepting students in that way too as well?
I can't speak about the past. I can speak about August 15th until now.
Right.
No one has picked up the phone and said, Nakia, can I place them there? They go through a process. We always ask for it. Yeah, I can't talk about the past, but I can talk about from the time that I've sat in this seat about placement.
Right.
They submit a packet.
Right.
We make a determination, and we make placement. Now, yes, so there are a lot of packets that are sent back to school.
Right.
The information that I shared about the 215 students, those are just actual bodies that we placed there.
Right.
So we had more
Right.
come to us, but they were sent back.
Because of consistency.
Either lack of documentation, it didn't really follow.
Great, that's my point.
Yes, we
That's
send them
That's
back.
my point. 'Cause
Yes.
the consistency is there.
The recommendation will send in a letter form, and that letter will say the student will return back to the home school, blah, 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 blah.
Thank you.
Yes, so either or. So our decisions are either return back to the home school or placement at the alternative school program.
All right.
Okay, I wasn't aware. All right, so we're gonna add the 4 ways in the first paragraph based on what we had in the past. And then you had another question, Mr. Panther, you said? Or?
Well, I said I was finished, but.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't
wanted us
missing
to get
anything.
through a certain amount of the process there. But
We're trying, Mr.
what kind of repeat numbers do you have?
Repeaters?
215, yeah. How many people are repeating right choices for
About 25 to 30 of those students come back.
the same year or?
Yeah, same year.
That's it, I mean.
Yes, same year, 25,
That's
30,
90 days.
or longer.
Wow.
I mean, I'm talking about cumulative now, because they were there 45 days.
Yeah,
And then,
I know
yeah,
that's
okay,
what
I
I'm
just,
saying.
I didn't want, yeah.
And now that goes back to that. What did they do the second time? The same kind of thing?
Yeah, so for example, we had one kid at Hilton Head that brought, drugs, and he brought drugs again.
See,
Wow.
and that's really
And this is
bad.
after
Right.
being referred to.
And this was after we referred him somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And then you gotta think about those kids, and this might be a small number of those kids, but those kids who feel comfortable in a smaller environment versus being in a high school of 900,
You said
1,500
they're trying to get back there?
Some of them do.
So a lot of our repeaters do fall in the drug possession, drug usage category.
They pull away that dessert for
Right,
lunch
so a
there.
lot of them, they do need that additional support.
Yeah,
Because they're,
absolutely.
I had to go back to that choice.
Drug possession and drug use.
yeah, so we have drug use, drug distribution, and drug possession, all 402, which is level 4.
And actually, just to speak to what Ms. Whitman just spoke about, actually, be surprised it's really a large, it might be a little more of a large amount of kids who actually gotten in, has gotten comfortable in that zone versus actually being in a large setting of their peers. So some of them do things just to go back there, just like during the winter time. Sometimes homeless people, they do stuff so they can go to jail and get a cold shower and get a meal.
Right.
So some of those kids actually do want to kind of actually be in that placement setting.
Especially if their friend is there.
Right. Well. Actually, some of them might not want to go to the friend because I'm speaking from my experience because I worked over there,
Right.
and I have been in that setting. So no, some of them they are just comfortable in that setting alone.
Of the former Owls Academy students that we tracked this semester, 3 of them pretty much told us they were going to act up so they could go back to right choices because it was a small environment. So we had 3 of the 68 that they did something to violate and went back to right choice. So yes. All right, yes. Okay, so the description of the alternative school program that includes the mission statement. And I guess right now we have the Right Choices program as an alternative education designed to support the education, behavior, social, emotional needs of our 6th through 12th students enrolled in Beaver County School District. I didn't know how we're going to do this. Is feedback?
I mean, I think if anybody has anything to
Yeah, just
add,
independent.
this is a very informal committee as
All
far
right.
as.
The next is just the description of the targeted audience. The Right Choices serve students 6 through 12, including students with disabilities. Students are placed in the Right Choices alternative program by the hearing officer of district alternative placement.
But we also need to
But
add
we
to
also
that
need
IEP
IEP team.
Yeah.
And re-entry too.
But that was
But
just
yeah,
under
that's
the
true,
team.
that's true.
So it's gonna add IEP team.
Is it the school's IEP too? The homeschool?
Yes, the homeschool. And we did have feedback from Barbara Drayton, who supervises the special education department for the state, and she said that process works, so she didn't have any problems with that process. But what she told us to be mindful of, from a systematic perspective, understand the number of special educations that are there. So, for example, if you're for middle school, you're referring to kid, you don't know that Ladies Island refer to special education students. So systematically, we need to make sure that we understand what the numbers are.
And how many special ed teachers do you have?
Currently, as of last year's staffing, one.
And how many special ed kids?
There were, I think, like 16 to 18 kids.
From middle to high school and one teacher?
But again, this is not all at the same time, kids move in and out.
Right.
Yes.
And Dr. Campbell, just to that point, it is not the homeschool's problem to worry about the numbers of students with special needs. Because, I mean.
No. She was
In
just
the past, things have, in the past,
Oh.
students have actually, it's been a very difficult process in years past to actually have open communication, get a student to right choices if a student had an IEP.
Correct.
So,
She was mentioning people like us at the district
being
level.
aware of it.
Being aware of the
Right.
numbers, because if we need to make adjustments to staffing
Right.
to accommodate the needs of the kids, we need to be aware of that.
Doesn't mean the door's closed.
Right,
Right.
That is what she meant by that.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Alrighty,
So now we're
goals.
moving into goals and objectives. The first goal, provide a safe and nurturing learning environment. 100% of the students placed at Right Choices Alternative Program receive support from the counselor, behavior management specialist, for both the home and alternative, homeschool and alternative program.
This would be,
You have to go.
I have to go to Riverview Charter Lottery.
Okay, thank
So
you.
you'll
Appreciate
make sure,
being here.
but Kiki's gonna be the notes.
Yes,
So every kid that is, our current reality is this, every kid that is placed at Right Choices are scheduled to meet with the behavior management specialist, and that information, based on the meeting with the kid on a weekly basis, or sometimes more, but at least weekly, that information is documented. You chime in when you need to.
Okay, and the school counselor at this point is the homeschool counselor.
Right. At this time, it's
At this point.
At this point.
But our hope is.
But our hope is that there's a school counselor at the alternative program.
This shit is gonna find
Well, listen.
We'll take
you
it from
Chrissy,
Chrissy.
take it from Chrissy. You just cut that. Stop.
Just cut two of my people. Take two of them.
Yeah.
Hurry up, that's right.
Excuse me, my question. Isn't there here guidance counselor here?
Jerry, didn't you?
Yeah, right. Why can't, if this program is housed here, why can't we use the head guidance counselor here? Because
So
she's the director of secondary
secondary
education.
education, but her
And
background
she's,
is counseling.
and she supports the school counselors.
right, but I thought that there was a title that there was a head guidance counselor working there.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Because
So when we had Islands Academy Right Choices, she
Right.
was housed there.
Right.
And she was the lead counselor.
Right.
But now her role is director of secondary.
Okay, so basically we hadn't filled that position that she was working at.
Right, correct.
She took that job.
Yeah, she moved into instructional services as director of secondary.
Okay, because
And we never went back and filled a position at Right Choices for that.
Okay, right, because if we wasn't, I would be saying, my question would be, well, what happened to that person, or why did that person
Yes,
serve
that's it.
Right Choice
So when
in their house there?
yeah, so when she left, she went to director of secondary. We didn't fill it for those
Okay,
positions.
okay. Same thing with the nurse.
So nurse part-time, half-time nurse there.
Right.
She's the lead,
Right, and she's housed here too,
and
right?
she's housed here.
Makes economic, makes sense, money-wise. All right.
Okay, so, develop a heightened sense of citizenship and service to others. 100% of the students placed at Right Choices Alternative Education Program will complete a minimum of 5 hours of community service. We are very inconsistent with that. And that's just data collected from last year. A lot of times, when kids are placed, we do add on the minimum of 10 hour.
Sometimes we do up to 20, 30 hours, depending on what the violation is. If they've repeated the same offense, then we've added additional community service hours.
Right, but we just feel like the kids that are served there, that should be at least a minimum for all, not some.
Is that included in your behavior plan?
It should be in the goals established at intake into Right Choice, the minimum of 5 hours. But if there are students who are by the committee in the disposition, if we say the student is to serve 10 hours, then they don't do just the 5 hours, they have to meet the required hours.
And the community service documentation is uploaded in the file part of Enrich, so we look at that.
How do you facilitate that? Community service.
Kid, like for
Student
example.
and family are required to seek.
Oh, they have to
Yes,
seek.
they have to seek
Bring in
and bring in the
documentation.
documentation.
That you were coordinated with the judges and the other
That,
entities, boys and girls club, stuff like that.
not right now.
Yeah.
All right,
Goal 3, provide training and resources to create an appropriate learning environment through professional development. By December 2019, a needs assessment will be conducted for 100% of Right Choices alternative education program staff to determine professional development needs. The needs assessment data will be utilized to build a professional development plan.
What we found in our data this year, there were several teachers that serve at Right Choices weren't trained, like just simple training, like CPI, crisis prevention. I mean, of all the students that we serve, they need to be trained in that. So we want to make sure that we're going to identify the trainings that need to occur with teachers who serve our alternative students and ensure that 100% of those teachers are trained.
And through us participating in the MTSS cohort, we kind of built this next goal. So that's identify a universal screener to be implemented by the start of the 2019-2020 school year. By August 2019, Right Choices Alternative Education Program intake personnel will be trained and prepared to implement the selected universal screener.
We're going to talk about that.
Okay, so the question, the comment I had on that one is you're writing a goal that you hope to achieve in the first month, right? So aren't these annual goals? So I'm just not sure that's a goal that should be, I mean, you're hoping that will be done by the beginning of the school year. And so goals are typically guidance for the whole year. And so I just would recommend that maybe, you might think of a different goal.
Or if I think about this, because we receive different kids throughout the year, so maybe we could just change in the date because
change the wording.
Because I may get a kid in December,
Right.
he's not going to have that screener done in August.
Right.
It's going to take a couple, maybe a week or two. So I just feel like it should be.
Yeah, but it's just your goal is identity.
Yeah.
It goes
Yeah.
to train apparently from him.
So could we just change?
Have a person prepared. Can a person be prepared to do the training by August?
You're talking about the screener?
Well,
The
and
universal
what's your
screener?
screener for?
Yes, you're talking about goal 4.
It's a universal screener for behavior.
Oh, so it's a behavior
A behavior
scale.
screener. We don't
Okay.
have, yes.
So you're gonna use like a self-assessment scale, or what do
You look like you're about to offer a suggestion for
I
me.
was just listening.
Oh, okay. I was just checking.
I might, but I was
This is not an academic.
No,
Correct.
this is behavior screener.
Right.
Because right now for academics, we use MAP, so we're looking at, okay, these students are at this alternative program. How can we find out the needs? The needs are different.
Right.
So if we have a universal screener that can give us information to serve them appropriately.
Excuse me, what have you done in the past? Have you had any deal with this?
Usually our screener, our alternative behavior academics, they're all together as a school.
Right.
As he said earlier. So we do STAR assessment at the beginning. For social emotional learning, we have 2 different curriculums. One was second step for middle school.
Right.
And then we had a high school. The high school screener is basically about 5 core competencies, and they did a self-assessment to see where they failed. And as we taught the competencies throughout the year, they took the same survey at the end of the year.
Okay, thanks. That's your
that's
program,
similar
so
to-
that's, no.
Oh, and I'm just listening.
So can we just,
Thank you.
No, I mean, y'all can work together, so that's good though that we do have some grounds, y'all got it.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna work on this, measurable objective of this goal.
Yeah, I think
we
we just,
change it?
Well, and then also we need to look at, because we talked about intake personnel, so we just need to probably wordsmith this one. So we'll email you, we'll get back to you.
And I'd like to revisit goal 2.
Okay.
And if that's gonna be an objective, I think you need to take more ownership in it. I don't think you can leave the responsibility for our goals on the parents. If it's your goal, then you gotta find a way to get it done.
So I like your suggestion, and maybe we'll reach out to some of the community agencies and we can help to coordinate.
Yeah, I
think we can do
that's
that.
the way you want to do, because now you got the stats, you got the numbers, and you know it's happening.
Speaking of goals, you can almost add your restorative practices right there. If the training with not just what they do outside of the school and community service, but if it's a behavior modification, what are the programs that they're doing inside, not just meeting with someone, but what are we teaching them that's different from the traditional school?
Right, so that goes back to my question, how is this different? This looks a lot like, I mean, something like this you would see in a regular middle school or, a high school, so that, I think that's a great suggestion.
Okay, so we got our notes on those. That wraps up the goals that we have. How the goals and objectives are related to the identified needs. Beaufort County School District desires to assist students to direct their own lives and to define success for themselves while thinking critically and creatively. The goals and objectives support the mission of working with students who are placed outside of the normal classroom environment into the Beaufort County School District Alternative Education Program. The proper implementation of the objectives, alternative placement, recidivism should be reduced and the quality of services delivered should increase. Any feedback on that part?
Can we change the word normal to traditional? I just think
I gotta
that's
find normal.
You only said it twice, the last
Normal
paragraph,
classroom.
and then at the beginning, the statement of need.
And just a suggestion, but after Beaufort County School District desires, you might want to say is committed to,
Thank you.
And I didn't really go through, but every one of your goals and objectives relates to identified needs. Okay.
What was that?
Every one of your goals and objectives relates to identified needs, because that is the question right there. How are the goals and objectives related to the identified needs? So maybe by adding in what you suggested, the words from the administrative regulations, it will make these more apparent. Because I wasn't necessarily, I didn't see a lot of the connection the dots. Because the question says, how are they goals and objectives related to the needs? So if you add that in, it might just make it more
cohesive.
Well, just more straightforward to the state when they look at this. They're like, okay, it matches. Here's an identified need. That's what we're going to address it. There's a goal. Here's an objective. Right.
All right.
The reason you're doing it.
Right. Makes sense. How the goals and objectives, as well as the supporting activities, are based on interventions that have been proven effective in addressing the academic performance of students. The goals and objectives for the Beaufort County School District Alternative Education Program are based on interventions that have been proven to be supportive of the academic and behavioral needs of students. The Right Choices Alternative Program uses research-based interventions and strategies in the delivery of multi-tiered systems of support. The Beaufort County School District uses a blended approach to instruction, which involves direct teacher instruction, web-based curriculum with instructional support for student learning, and a life skills component to support students. This approach encourages student engagement and reduces the amount of challenging behaviors inside and outside of the classroom. So I think what you were just saying about the, I wrote it down, the restorative practices, I think this is another good place to tie that in as well. Did y'all need me to read this word for word to you? Or do we just I thought about it because I was reading it just now.
I didn't know. I was listening to you reading, making sure you were reading the words. Nah, you don't get it.
But we need the feedback.
We do need the feedback, so what we'll do is go question by question, and if there is, we'll give you a moment to read, and if you have any feedback, then we'll, okay. So we'll move on to the next one and allow you a moment to read.
You must have slow readers now.
Take your time, take your time.
Question.
Please do. Yes.
The life skills, the core teachers teach those courses? Is it a
Life
course?
skills is taught by the behavior management specialists.
Oh,
and it's a curriculum they teach.
And the teachers embedded in their core classes? Or
That's a good
separate?
question. I'm gonna say no to that,
Okay.
not based on my observations. I mean, I'm just,
That's why we're here.
I mean, I did classroom observations, I didn't see that in embedded life skills.
And
Go ahead, please.
last question.
Please don't.
Today. This moment. You said that it's a blended approach. How much direct teacher instruction are they actually getting?
So that, we need help when it comes to that. When I visit the classrooms this year, kids are like zombies on computers. All
The
day.
teacher service facilitators, basically.
Right.
And so they may have a 6th through 12th grade child in that math
Yeah, so
class.
that is the part that becomes difficult for the the facilitator, gotta be careful with my,
So they're not core content certified?
they are.
Oh, okay.
But because the grades, attendance, and discipline is housed at the home school based on state, yes, and accountability for the state, they act as the facilitator of instruction.
So there might be times when you have a student that's taking physical science, biology, and chemistry all
In the same class,
space.
and it's a moving vehicle. So she could get a different kid the next day, another kid transitions out.
I think
So
that-
we just need just,
And I think that teachers could really benefit from like true blended learning
Right.
training, and that's where you and I can work together on that, because if they do it in some center rotations where the teacher is able to do some direct instruction in a
Right.
small group, then it can be done. It just hasn't been set up that
and
way.
we just need to establish some goals, you know, like expectations and goals. And start small, you know, and then kind of move from there.
But that's a critical component, because that's why those kids are there.
Right.
You know, it's glazed over in the classroom many times, and now, when you do get a chance, you know, to facilitate, you really have to help them learn at the
How to
same
do
time.
it.
Yeah, so, yeah, because, you know, people on service now.
And how many percent of, how many teachers are we having there now this year? Coming
Like
up?
the end of this year or coming
No,
up?
coming up.
So.
We're gonna get to that.
That's one of their
It's
questions.
it's back here. Yeah, it's back here with the,
Okay,
okay.
okay.
So the next one we're on is the activities that incorporate unique and innovative educational approaches.
I did have a question about that first sentence. The BCSD alternative program blended learning tool allows students to reach their academic and behavioral goals through different learning inventories. What do you mean by a different learning inventory?
So it's kind of like the way that she just described with regards to, well.
I mean, an inventory is typically like,
You're correct, that's why I said, let me back up.
Differentiated
'Cause I'm-
instructional practices is maybe
Yes.
how that needs to be.
yeah,
So different, say that one more time.
Differentiated instructional
practices,
practices.
Gotcha.
teacher strategies, you know. And just a suggestion that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th line down, not sentence, but line, supported by caring and compassionate, maybe staff instead of passionate. Showing compassion, yeah. Okay. And then at the end there, criteria for transition. Let me back up. These systems of support will assist students in meeting criteria for transitioning back to their home school. Criteria for transition will require certain attendance. I mean, and below it says attach a timeline. I mean, are we going to attach, what is that criteria? Is it 30 points? Are they on a point system?
So the
It's
student,
the time, right?
yeah, last
So
year
she-
they did not have a point system.
Oh, they did not.
It was just bodies and seats for the amount of days that were placed there.
What about the behavior while they were earning points
No.
and earning their community service?
We
And
still got a lot of work to do.
We did not do that last
not
year,
do
so
that last
that's
year.
why we're here.
Thank you,
Yes. We did not do a point system last year,
Okay.
and there were reasons why, but we did not do that.
Okay. So when it says right here, the timeline, do we need, maybe attach, do we have to add anything there? That's up to you. It says may, it doesn't say
Yeah.
has to be. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Anything else on this one before we move to the next one?
And I think the last line on the page also references those learning inventories. Are we good? Alright, so now we're on the page with the number of teachers. I think you were asking about this too, weren't you, Mr. Smith?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so here we're on this page now.
So this is,
15-to-1 ratio.
yeah, they recommend that we have a 15-to-1 ratio.
At most.
At most. The low, you know, if we can reduce that, it's even better. And so, like, I started with the requirements, the 4 content and the special ed teacher, which is a requirement to operate. But I'm proposing that we go a little bit more than the minimum requirement, just so we can differentiate high school and middle school.
You said you want to have more than 15 kids per class?
No, more staff, so that we can keep that ratio lower.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Are you gonna include the SPED teacher here?
Yes, this was this. I guess
This is the way that
this
theirs
is the
is
way that
identified.
chart
It's like a
was.
checkbox.
It was a
It doesn't
checkbox,
have
so
a
you
frustrating, isn't
couldn't
it?
like add.
Okay.
So-
Do you need to put a narrative in there somewhere?
We probably could, and I'm gonna add this part, the elective, we could probably talk about if we're, if we wanna put the special ed teacher there and then,
We can probably reach out to AV just to get
yes.
some
It
clarification,
was,
because they don't have it in their chart.
right, this was the
And
chart that they
that's how-
provided.
Yeah, okay.
And you have to click the boxes,
Yeah.
or the bubbles. All right,
So, quick question, how many teachers did they have this year as prior?
let me get that. 'Cause I'm gonna tell you something. I think it was 14, but that might be, yeah, so when I did a board presentation, I don't know, I think this was the 29th of March. Thirteen,
13?
but that's 13 staff members, not all certified staff. So
That's including BMS too?
BMS, yes,
Okay.
special education teacher, social studies teacher, science, it was a PE teacher
Right,
there,
right.
math, office manager,
Right.
science, a middle school math, middle school ELA, an assistant principal and director.
Right.
So yeah.
And now, how many teachers are proposed to go there? I mean, what's the same staff as well? This year, this prior year coming out?
So we ran this report through finance. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, here. And, again, that was, what I gave you was after we closed Islands Academy.
Right.
Because there was some sharing
Right. Yeah.
among there, and
Right.
those teachers went on. So when we pulled the report, it showed 15 positions, but there were 2 positions that weren't filled.
Right.
So they didn't have the position, it was still staff for them, but it wasn't filled.
Right.
So I'm proposing that 3 of those positions are removed from last year. 1, the assistant principal. 2, there was a administrative assistant. I felt like if we had an office manager that could kind of facilitate that, and we didn't fill that position last year. And a SPED assistant. That was a question mark, just depending on our numbers. So with that, that could be a reduction of $131,000 with salaries and benefits for the alternative budget, which you have on there.
A reduction or a transfer of funds to like the counselor. and the
So
other
this is what
positions.
we did, good question. So we had the PE teacher that was here, so we felt that the counselor was more important to serve the kids. So that person is still listed, so we just like changed that. Because it's about position. Instead of having a PE teacher, we have a counselor. But
And that's okay for high school credit? You don't have to, I mean.
yeah, you don't. She mentioned that.
You don't want an elective? They don't take any electives?
Yes, we've not had electives in the past. We operate through Edgenuity.
If they're already currently.
If they're currently taking that elective,
Or
and
they
it's in the
put it in
Edgenuity
Google Classroom.
Yes. So again, I'm working with 2 pieces. the way to support the students, but also being mindful of the budget. And if there were any ways that I could cut, that was what we tried to do.
How many hours are they there on a regular day?
In the classroom, sitting watching the computer.
Actual, what is the requirement or what they actually do?
Both.
Okay, so the requirement from the State Department is 6.5 hours of seat time daily, not to include homeroom and not to include lunch. 6.5 hours per day. So because we transport kids from their home school to get to Right Choices, that means that students who live farthest away from the alternative program get to the school later than other students. So our
And leave earlier.
and leave early to get back on that bus. So we found that students that are at Hilton Head and Bluffton have less instruction or seat time than other students that live within this area. So that they average between 5 to 5.5 hours of seat time per day, which calculates to be about 8 to 10 days of missed instruction each semester.
So what's the plan?
So we had a brainstorming
Ready
session.
to write the check. No matter how we slice this, it's going to increase. To either they're going to be, we pick them up door to door on the early route to get them there in enough time to have enough seat time for all students. We thought about trunk stops because we've done that in the past where they're responsible to at least get to a certain area. We did that with Ames Academy. But what we found with this, just hear this out for a second, the students are going to be at these trunk stops the same time as elementary students because they're on the early schedule. And so just think about alternative students at the trunk stops with elementary students.
So there's a supervision issue right there.
There's a supervision problem when the kids are waiting
Yeah.
at their home school to be
Right.
picked up.
Right. So to add that
And
additional,
then when they're dropped off at the end of the day with their
Right.
home school, and then they're mixing with the,
yes.
you
So
So
I'm
do
just,
they have to be, I mean, what's the impact of having a different stop?
like a different homes, or
Just-
a
just
trunk
Different bus route.
Different bus
Yeah,
stop.
yeah, different,
Just for
those
those kids,
yeah.
right? So they're not at the same bus stop
as the other.
as the elementary kids.
Well, what,
We can explore that. What we did explore was the trunk stops. And we had a conversation with Tori in transportation. She provided me the arrival and departure for the year, like about when the kids arrive and when they leave. So I could have an idea of the estimated loss of seat time. And then we talked about the trunk stop as a cost-effective way, more cost-effective than a door-to-door delivery.
I'm concerned that we're not gonna get through this, and there's so many things I know that you guys are trying to work out and so on, but, you guys have to have this by July 12th, and some of this bus stop stuff, I mean, you know, so you wanna finish just going through this real fast, and
I
then,
can ask my last question, and this right. Well, I'm concerned when you said that you want to get rid of the sped assistant if we have a large amount of sped kids.
No, I said, not get rid of it. I said we would look at our numbers.
Right.
Yes.
I thought you, what did you say about the sped assistant? You said you're looking at doing more probably with 3 positions?
Right, so one of them we did not fill the whole year.
Right, I got
That
you,
was the
right,
administrative
right.
assistant. And HR, I think is here. I think we transferred or got rid of the position for an assistant principal.
Right.
And then I said I had a question mark about the special ed assistant.
Right. Well, my question was hopefully that we wouldn't get rid of that or the assistant principal because of the fact that this is a school, but this is an alternative school, mind you. When the principal leaves, well, even with it being a program, it's still I look at it, I call it a program, it's a school, it's functional. When someone has to be held accountable. So when the principal leaves that school or that program, who's going to be accountable because anything can happen. These are kids that could possibly go off the deep end.
Right.
And I've been there, so I know how it functions. So my question is,
so we did.
Are we putting other people in
So
engagement?
we did talk about additional certification, like an admin certification.
Right.
So there is an additional, not additional, but a 7th teacher that wasn't factored in the rotation. We wanted to make sure that we had that ratio. So we were looking at maybe a teacher on a special assignment that is a teacher but has an administrative certification that we could use in a special circumstance like that. That was just thinking, trying to be creative.
Right.
Yes.
And I'm just asking this because if y'all bring this for the board, I'm gonna ask that question.
Right.
Because that's the, I mean, when you look at it from a offensive long term, if something happened, then we're gonna say, well, the person who just went in that day, who was in charge? In every building, someone must be in charge. We can't say, well, this person we assume. We don't want to assume. So that's my point of view. I just
Yeah,
want to
I
put that
agree.
forward.
Safety is
That's
a,
right.
is, you know, a
Right.
priority.
And these are recommendations, this is
Right.
nothing set in stone.
Right. But I'm just, I just want to bring it out because I've been in that climate.
Yeah. And did you have an SRO at your program?
Oh, we did.
You did, okay, so that's kind of also, we haven't discussed an SRO, and there's been a lot of conversation about how come Right Choices doesn't have an SRO, right?
Yeah, it has, and I mean, you know, the SRO, I'm not sure how her and her SRO, but that's a very important position that her and the SRO have to do, because that could be a very sticky situation too, because you could have an SRO that says, hey, look here, I don't tolerate this, versus the director saying, yeah, we have a standard of what we expect, but the SRO standard must say, he even think he's a street officer.
Yeah.
And so that could be a killer. Me personally.
Yeah, we're trying to rebuild and develop.
Me personally, I don't really see a serious need for a SRO. But I mean, it's right. I mean, but it's up to her. I mean, if she needs that and that's what she's comfortable with, then that's good.
I think if you haven't had to have one, then it's probably not a big issue. Our SROs were restorative practices trained. They actually led the training for that. So they were more of a social emotional piece, not as far as strong arming or if there's problems or issues. They stayed in the background. They weren't.
Yeah, in our structure, like the first semester, the way that it was set up, Allen's Academy kind of had their administrator,
Right.
and Right Choices had their administrator.
Right.
So now that we don't have Allen's Academy, we were just kind of looking at that as a cost savings too. I mean, because that's how we,
So
that's,
you're gonna have to flesh this out then, right?
right, but that's what we're looking at. Yes.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you
me. I
all,
have to
thank you
drive.
so much for coming.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. See
Very
you
much
July 1st. But you'll probably hear from me before then.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, so some of these questions, you know, Will, the great questions you're asking, I would think that maybe you guys would work on that and we could at the next meeting. You know, so why don't we just go through this and then make some more lists, and we have a meeting next Wednesday also. I'm gonna add you guys. The following, July 3rd, we have a meeting.
Okay, July 3rd, yeah.
You know? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so the next one, the counseling, how will the program provide counseling? I know we've talked about that quite a bit, but you did say the second sentence, counseling services related to education would be provided by school counselors. That is the homeschool counselor, right? Okay. Anybody sees anything, just speak up.
And the agencies that are listed are agencies that we have MOAs with and we will continue to have, so.
Okay.
Is Right Direction for WRIG?
Yes, it's named after him.
All right.
Mr. Wright.
Yeah. So, on the next section, the program facilitates for the students transition back. It says the alternative education program will establish goals for students. They're establishing their goals through their behavior plan. So they're establishing the goals, or what do you mean by that?
When they transition into the program,
I know that right here. Transition back to his or her original school. So you guys are establishing the goals for students placed in the alternative program?
on the front end, so at intake.
Okay, so that's their behavior, through their behavior plan, or where are the goals established?
Yes, through a behavior plan and enrich.
Okay.
Yeah, so
say
we,
something in-
can I add to that? So there are kids, like we talked about the tier 3 students.
Yeah.
Those kids are already established. So we're just reviewing, we're trying to find out that next intervention for that student.
Okay.
But there are kids who are one-timers, isolated, where
Right.
they don't have a behavior plan, but they brought drugs to school.
Right.
And so when they're placed there, the Right Choices established a plan for them.
And I just think that'd be really great to put that in
Okay,
there, in a
yes,
plan,
yes.
so establish
Right,
goals.
right.
So everybody knows where that,
I got
there
you.
should be a
I
plan.
got it, yes. And that satisfies everyone will have a plan.
Right. Anybody have anything? Just.
Looking at the intake back at the home school. And you have suggestions to the home school teachers and parents about how to continue to be successful, provided they've been successful at right choices, then going forward, you were there giving some tips on what needs to be done.
Right, so the behavior plan would follow them, but then also the documentation that's provided by the behavior management specialist. So the behavior management
At Right
specialist.
Choices?
Right, exactly. At
Yeah.
Right Choices would document those interventions. The behavior management specialist at the home school would then be able to access that information.
So they can see what those.
See how it corresponds with.
So-
Are they gonna also see how it corresponds with the original thing that they brought in?
So there's progress monitoring data that would be attached to it as well, so they would be able to access
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
What they started with at the school, yes.
Yes.
So once they're placed there, we have access to what was done at the home school.
Yeah, and I'm trying to going back to the home school now.
So we have that
And
transition.
You're gonna show the continuity between the gap of the time they entered Right Choice to the time they're now going back to that old IEP sports team of supporters there.
Yeah, what we did this year is really utilize Enrich, because at the Right Choices side, we had all these different pieces of paper. So we were like, no, we have Enrich, that's the portal that we're gonna use, and everyone has access who needs access. So when the student is at the home school and their interventions is documented. When they are placed at Right Choices, we have access to that information. And then when they have the exit, what am I trying to say? The transition back, they're having a conversation about the strategies that they used at Right Choices and how
what
that
I'm
student
asking,
responded to those strategies.
Right, that's what I'm asking.
And so the principal or his designee or her designee is there, so we're having that conversation about, hey, when Mr.
Yeah.
Smith was here,
The
these are the
reason- yeah.
strategies that we
The
use.
reason I'm asking that is because, they can upgrade it to a degree. If
Yeah.
you've done something different or
Right.
this really worked well with us, then those folks can upgrade what they have.
Little things, we found
Yeah.
like certain kids respond to certain gender teachers, like, hey, this, so we're
Yeah,
having that
those
conversation.
things are necessary.
Right,
The only thing I have is this district truancy intervention panel. Where is that?
yeah, talk about that too.
So the district truancy intervention panel is another part of my job, which is when students are referred to that panel for violating with regards to truancy. So if they've missed an excessive number of days, they've not complied with the attendance plan that they signed, then they are referred to the TIP. And we can make a determination as to whether outside services need to be provided, whether we need to refer to family court, whether we need to refer to DSS or alternative placement.
I'm gonna give you a short version real quick. So Aveen Coleman supervises truancy and alternative education.
Okay.
So I think she put those questions in this document
Oh, got it.
because it
Okay.
satisfies her responsibility in
Sure.
the state money.
Okay.
Yes.
But how come you're doing that and not the school social worker?
Keep unpacking.
Okay, I mean,
There's a line that says other duties of the sign.
so it's not done at the school level.
I like that answer.
So the attendance interventions are done at the school level. But once it rises to a certain level, if they're not responsive to the interventions that are provided, it then is referred to the district level. Yes, ma'am.
That's what the district after a certain amount of days.
Right. Yeah.
But there's a question I want to ask about this, and I guess it goes back to the seat hours. How do you justify a passing grade after they've missed so many seat hours in the right choices?
They're required to make up the seat time hours.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
at the end of
At
the
the
year?
end of the year.
Okay.
So we have students who completed, they sat during summer school to get their seat hours. Like there was one, well, that was a former Islands Academy student. They just had to,
As a follow-up, there's probably a suggestion, probably just a thought from my standpoint. Can we, and it's truancy too, restrict the days absent at right choices?
Yeah, so if they miss a day, they add on a day.
Right, I mean, yeah.
If they're required to attend 45 days and they miss 3 days, they're going to attend 48 days.
Okay.
yes.
I got you.
And that's through suspension or absence.
Yeah, but they can't make those 3 days at right choices up at the regular school.
Correct.
I'm saying, you got 45
They
days.
can't transition until they've done the 45 days.
Well, yeah, but that's counterproductive to the numbers still, right? I mean, if you're gonna do 50 days at right choices, now that cut the days at my regular school that I'm supposed to do 135.
Well, they make their hours here as well. So the hours don't stop when they're removed from the school environment. They're required, the seat time is made here as well. If I'm understanding your question.
You're saying 3 days missed is 3 days missed. I'm saying if you need the seat hours and right choices, giving the seat hours, you got a certain portion of the days of the school year where students are allowed to miss, 20% of the time? So you got a 20% time slot there, but that 20% time slot is not being facilitated with your program because you get them there late and you return them late.
Right.
So can you change the percentage of days that they can miss?
Oh, good question, yes. So she talked about that. So there are programs that have extended calendars. So instead of like the alternative program, they may need 200 days because it's built in. They're still going to meet the requirement, but like you said, if a kid needs additional time, it's built in that calendar.
Yeah, good. So once you sign into right choices, you already know your year have just been extended.
Right, and the other thing that you have is extended hours. So there are alternative programs where kids come in at 9 and they cannot leave until 6. So they build in the extended day. Yeah, but that's the transportation.
Yeah.
So
All these,
either or.
I'm just thinking.
Yeah, they have extended calendars. Yes,
So
yes,
see,
sir.
hours, that's what the state
Yes.
gonna come back and get the
Yes.
whole district on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's right.
Yes, sir. But yeah, extended calendar days and hours.
Okay.
Yes.
You sure you don't want to stay?
Don't worry, I'll be back tomorrow.
Back tomorrow, yeah. You can do that tomorrow.
Ron Hilton tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I won't be back here.
Just teeny, the district administrative rule, isn't it bringing forward the regulations, are we using interchangeably? Just keep,
Yeah, because I have it in the next sentence of the regulation.
yeah. And And then the last question I had before I get to the budget is this evaluations. Again, that question I keep asking in my head, how is this different? So these are all things that we use, you know, but your real focus is behavior. So some of your benchmarks should be behavior-based,
And
right?
that's why we went to that universal at the beginning, because we felt like the screener.
Right?
Yeah, but put that there.
You know, a social, emotional
Yes,
scale. I mean,
scale.
you don't have to name it.
Yeah, you're right.
Like pass
You're
and
right.
map. You
Yes.
might just want to say, and even just, you know, learning inventories
Yes.
would fit
Yeah.
perfectly here.
Right.
You know,
You're
that-
right.
so that you're able to differentiate yourself from
You're right.
just the academics.
Right.
Yeah. And then just lastly, the paragraph above the budget, it says those data points will be used to draft and implement academic and behavioral intervention plans. We're gonna write an academic intervention plan? Or is it you're strictly writing behavior plans?
So let me clarify that with AV.
Good, okay.
Because that will satisfy the question in the first
Exactly.
document about the academic and engaged student. And then we'll come back to that, because we may have to.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, great.
So I will do that.
All right.
All right, so I know that's a huge sticker price at the bottom.
Yeah.
So I know there
I
were
didn't
questions.
look
So I and my finance person is going, I'm gonna try to get to this.
And look, and this goes to your questions now.
So this is
Right here, the salaries and stuff tells you how many people, okay?
Yeah, so I went to finance and I found out that this is really the budget from last year.
Yes.
Okay, so I
Okay.
just wanted to make sure we have clarity, not for July 1. This is what we spent last year. So the State Department gives us approximately $2 million for at-risk funds that we utilize. We utilize it not just for our alternative program. Oh, we don't just utilize it for our alternative program. We utilize it for parent educators. So it's preventive as also reactive measures. So in those line items, you'll
You said
see.
2 million?
$2 million from the state for alternative, at-risk students.
Or at-risk student, not also, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Right.
At-risk.
2 million for at-risk students.
So it's not
And
just
that could be an overarching
Yeah, so I'm
umbrella,
looking-
it's not specific
to the alternative program.
Right.
But we use a portion of that for the alternative program.
Gotcha.
So for example, at-risk students, you may see your BMS come out of that because they are associated with our at-risk students. Special Olympics, summer reading camp, 9th grade orientation.
Wait, why is Special Olympics coming out of at-risk instead of special ed ones?
Yeah, you might need to ask Terry. I went through and I got an itemized list of what came, some that's being used for at-risk.
Some portion of it. We don't
Some
know.
portion.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a question. So I just wanted people to realize it wasn't just the alternative program that's coming out of that.
Okay.
So it's about $2 million that we receive from the state for at-risk students. All right, so again, this is what we spent last year for salaries, employee benefits, purchase services, supplies, materials, and other.
What's other?
Printing sometimes, or like books, you know, things like that.
And what's purchased services?
That could be travel
Yes.
for, like the
Going to
director,
a
going to state
conference,
conferences.
Some of that's
mileage,
state meetings.
out-of-state meetings.
So it's called purchased services?
Yes,
Okay.
it falls under that 300 area, so it could.
Could be that?
Yes.
What kind of supplies we using over there?
Say that again?
What kind of supplies and materials we using over there?
Yeah, for
So again,
$22,000?
so here,
got
here I
big
go.
laptops.
So let me say this.
But that comes out of a different
This
fund.
is the budget, not saying that we spent everything in there. So I would have to pull
So
that
we
from
would have to pull the
finance
expenditure
and
report to
tell
see
you
exactly
how
what
much
was
we
spent.
spent against that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So
They build the-
if providing access to, with blended learning, right? So you might have some technology component,
Yeah.
right? So is the licensing cost of some of that, in supplies and materials? I don't know.
It shouldn't.
I don't know, but any software they use comes out of our instructional software budget.
Yeah, but yeah, but
Yeah, so I would need to ask additional questions about, I just wanted to kind of convey that it's not just the alternative program, but there are other pieces that we serve our at-risk students in the district. And we received about $2 million from that.
So did you add this up? I mean, just quickly, what is this, 1.2?
I can add
One
it real quick.
point.
We didn't.
I remember 1.3.
Yeah.
There's all our math majors over there.
So again, this amount represents 15
Zero.
salaries,
Yeah, 15.
15 salaries.
Now, this amount last year.
Last year's 15, so the personnel salaries is 15.
Mhm.
And I kind of talked about what those 15 covered.
Right.
And again, the proposal was to cut back, find ways that we could. So we have a proposal on the table for 13 positions. I'm sorry, 12 positions of.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Yes.
The board proposed for y'all to cut back on red choices?
No.
I actually, because you said that it was proposed to cut back on red choices, and I'm just, I just want to make sure that the board is not proposing.
So we
that.
were all given a directive to look at our budgets and
Right.
find ways that we can cut back.
Right.
That was a directive across all
Okay, right,
departments.
okay, well, right, that's clarification.
Yeah, so
I'm just trying to
it wasn't just alternative education,
Right.
it was just look at your
Like I was
budget,
asked for instructional
find
software.
ways that you can cut back.
I'm sure there's plenty of places
Yeah.
technology to cut back, but I'm just saying, I don't see no, when
Right, and I-
when it comes to right choices, I just don't see where there's
Yeah.
space to cut back
Listen.
in right choices, because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it's something called nominated, and I'm not talking about the candy nominated either. I'm talking about either you pay me now, you pay me later, as in the form of a lawsuit. I want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a position to get a lawsuit.
Right, so I was given the directive to
Right.
look at each of my pots of money
Right.
and make.
I got you, I just want a
So
clarification. I
that
got
was
you.
my proposal, if
Right.
I had to
Cut
cut,
back.
I would cut those.
Well, so the big question is, do you have the staffing to open the school year with? How many students are you opening the school year with?
So right now, we are probably looking at about 52, because we have 2 little cases we have to make some determinations on during the summer school issues.
In the last 2 days of school.
In the
this year.
last 2 days, so we got, so about 52 students that are projected to be there.
And so the staffing allocations that you have right now are sufficient enough to provide the services that you need to provide?
Right.
Okay.
For
Now, you're talking about,
students or for more than 50?
right now, a little more than 52 students.
It's gonna,
But
it's not gonna shrink.
it's gonna determine, I mean, it really depends on who we serve, and we can't make a determination of what kid is gonna bring something. And.
But you can't.
Yes, but at the highest peak that we have had throughout this school year, we served 73 kids at
So
a time.
how will you accommodate them when it grows to that point?
So we,
When it grows to that point? Got it.
so
Well,
that
this
is
number
why.
accommodates
this is-
72, yes.
Right, so that is
Good.
why, right,
Good.
the
Okay.
extra teacher was in here, so
To
we're,
serve in two
to serve in 2 capacities.
If necessary.
If necessary.
Okay.
That was why we kept the 7th person, not 6.
You got the luxury state at the beginning of the school year. Have a
Right.
little flex.
Yeah, but it increases, and we've even
Yeah.
looked at what month we receive more kids. October, we get more, March, we get more. So we know we're gonna get 70 around March.
Maybe more some coaches in the instruction coaches.
So again, I was just tasked with finding ways that we can cut, and these were just some of those suggestions.
All right, so where do you want us to go from here? There were several changes.
Yes.
So,
So this is what I'm thinking. Today is Wednesday. Y'all have a meeting on Friday. You think we can make these? But I got, the part that I'm concerned is reaching out and getting an email from AU. That's hard to.
I thought we said July 3rd.
Oh, I thought the
Yes,
edits.
July
I thought the edits. July 3rd. Gotcha.
Yeah, you guys will come back
Got
July
it.
3rd with everything,
Perfect,
exactly how you want it submitted.
Perfect.
Right?
Okay, perfect. Yes. I thought you were saying.
No, we're gonna have to get on her.
You guys
schedule.
decide, yeah.
Day
maybe,
one.
Yeah.
Oh, boy, John.
Right after she finishes going